don't think I've ever been someone's first choice. Not immediately, not without hesitation. I've been liked, wanted, texted every day. But when it came down to it, there was always a pause. Let me think. I'm not sure what I want. The timing isn't right. And you start noticing a pattern. You're good enough to keep around, good enough to talk to, good enough to feel close to, but not good enough to be picked without doubt. And that does something to you, because you don't want to compete. You don't want to prove yourself. You don't want to convince someone to see what's already there. You just want one person who doesn't hesitate, one person who doesn't compare you, doesn't explore other options, doesn't need to figure it out, just chooses you. And when that hasn't happened yet, the question creeps in quietly. Is there something about me that makes people unsure? When you're never the first choice, you start overperforming. You become extra understanding, extra patient, extra available. You respond faster. You give more reassurance. You try to be easier to love, because maybe if you're perfect enough, they won't hesitate. Maybe if you don't complain, don't ask for too much, don't pressure them, they'll finally pick you confidently. So you adjust, you downplay your needs, you accept the bare minimum, you tell yourself you're just being mature, but really, you're trying to secure a spot, you're trying to prove that you're worth choosing. And the painful part is this: even when you give your best, even when you're thoughtful, loyal, consistent, they still hesitate. And that's when it hits. It was never about you not doing enough. It was about them not being sure. And no amount of overperforming can fix someone else's uncertainty. After a while, it stops feeling like coincidence. It starts feeling like proof. Proof that maybe you're missing something, that maybe there's a quality you don't have, that maybe you're just almost exciting enough, almost attractive enough, almost unforgettable. And when you sit with that long enough, it begins to chip at your confidence. You start comparing yourself to the people they did choose. What do they have that I don't? What do they do differently? Why was it easier to commit to them? And the dangerous part, you begin to rewrite yourself in your head. Maybe I'm too available, too soft, too deep, or maybe not enough of something else. So you question your personality, your timing, your worth. But here's the truth that hurts before it heals. Someone else's preference is not a measurement of your value. You can be incredible and still not be someone's first choice. Not because you're lacking, but because alignment isn't forced. And just because someone didn't see you clearly doesn't mean you weren't clear. It just means they weren't your person. At some point you get tired, not bitter, not angry, just tired. Tired of feeling like you're competing without signing up for a competition. Tired of being compared to other options. Tired of waiting for someone to decide. Tired of proving you're worth choosing. And something shifts. You stop trying to outshine anyone. You stop adjusting yourself to win. You stop playing it cool just to stay in the running. Because love isn't supposed to feel like auditions. You shouldn't have to outperform someone to be valued. You shouldn't have to worry about whether you're the best option available. You either align or you don't. And once you realize that, you stop competing. You don't fight for a spot. You don't beg to be prioritized. You don't argue your value. You just observe. If someone's unsure, that's your answer. Not because you're not enough, but because you refuse to be an option. And the moment you stop competing, you stop feeling small, because you remember something important. You're not here to be the best choice in a lineup. You're here to be the only choice for the right person. The moment you refuse to compete, your standards rise automatically. You stop accepting, let's see where this goes. You stop entertaining mixed signals. You stop tolerating being someone's backup plan. Because if someone has to compare you, they're not aligned with you. It's that simple. You don't need to be better than anyone else. You don't need to win. You don't need to outperform. You just need someone who sees you and doesn't hesitate. And once you decide you're no longer an option, you start moving differently. You don't over-explain. You don't over-give. You don't overstay. If someone's energy feels unsure, you don't chase clarity, you step back, not to play games, not to test them, but because you value yourself enough to not beg for certainty. And here's the truth. The right person won't need alternatives. They won't weigh you against other options. They won't keep you around while exploring. They'll know. And when you finally believe you deserve that kind of clarity, you stop asking, why am I never the first choice? Because you realize you were just giving your energy to people who weren't capable of choosing fully. Being someone's second option was never your identity. It was a season, a pattern you tolerated, a dynamic you accepted, a lesson you hadn't learned yet, but it was never who you are. You weren't born to compete for attention. You weren't designed to be compared. You weren't meant to sit around waiting for someone to decide if you're enough. That was just a chapter, and chapters end. What you thought was rejection was actually redirection. Because imagine being fully chosen by someone who had to debate it. Imagine building something with someone who once hesitated. That foundation would always feel shaky. So maybe not being first protected you from being second in someone's heart. Maybe every time someone paused, it was life removing you from something that wasn't certain. You weren't overlooked, you were misaligned. And misalignment isn't failure, it's filtering. You're not destined to be the second option. You were just learning what it feels like, so you'd never accept it again. Everything changes when you stop identifying as the almost. You stop saying, this always happens to me. You stop expecting to be overlooked, stop bracing for hesitation, stop assuming you'll be compared, because when you carry the identity of being second, you unconsciously accept second-place behavior. You tolerate inconsistency, you excuse uncertainty, you stay longer than you should, but the moment you decide that's not who you are, your tolerance drops. You don't romanticize mixed signals. You don't wait around for someone to decide. You don't attach yourself to potential. You start moving like someone who expects clarity, and that energy is different. You ask direct questions. You communicate directly. You walk away directly, not because you're cold, because you're done being confused. You're not almost. You're not maybe. You're not will see. You're either fully chosen or you're unavailable. And once you internalize that, the pattern breaks because you no longer accept roles that don't fit you. Being someone's first choice starts with being confident enough to walk away. Because if you're afraid to lose them, you'll accept almost. You'll accept, I'm not ready. You'll accept, I need time. You'll accept being kept around while they figure it out. Not because you're weak, but because you don't want to lose the connection. But here's the shift. The moment you realize you're okay walking away, you stop settling for hesitation. You stop clinging to potential. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop staying where you feel unsure. And that energy changes everything. You don't threaten to leave. You don't play games. You just won't stay where you're not certain. And when someone feels that, they either step up or they step out. Both are clarity, because being someone's first choice isn't about demanding it. It's about being willing to lose anything that doesn't offer it. And once you're strong enough to walk away from confusion, you stop ending up in it. The right person won't make you question your position. You won't have to decode their text. You won't have to wonder where you stand. You won't have to compete with silence. When someone is sure about you, it shows in consistency, in effort, in how they talk about you, in how they prioritize you. There's no gray area, and that's what you've been missing. Not love, not attraction, not chemistry, clarity. Because every time you felt like you weren't the first choice, it wasn't because you lacked something, it was because the situation lacked certainty. The right connection won't feel like a tryout. It won't feel like you're waiting for results. It won't feel like you're one option among many. It will feel stable, secure, intentional. And when you experience that, you'll realize something important. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. So why was I never the first choice? The truth, because I was entertaining people who weren't capable of choosing fully. It was never about my worth, never about me lacking something. Never about me being second best. It was about alignment. I was trying to be first in rooms where I was only an option. And once I stopped accepting that role, everything changed. I don't compete anymore. I don't overperform. I don't wait to be picked. If someone hesitates, I step back. If someone compares, I remove myself. If someone isn't sure, I let them find certainty somewhere else, because I finally understand something. The right person won't struggle to choose me. They won't need alternatives. They won't need time to decide if I'm enough. They won't treat me like a possibility. They'll treat me like a decision. And until that shows up, I'm not missing out. I'm filtering. So I'm done asking, why am I never the first choice? Now the question is simpler. If I'm not your first choice, why are you still an option for me? And that's the shift. You don't chase love because you're romantic. You chase love because you don't know how to sit with yourself yet. Because silence makes your thoughts loud. Because being alone feels like proof that something about you isn't enough. So you look for love to fill the space. You attach quickly. You overextend. You give more than you should, sooner than you should. Not because you're stupid, but because being chosen feels like relief. Like if someone wants you, then maybe you can stop questioning yourself for a while. You don't just want connection. You want validation. You want someone to prove that you're worth staying for, worth prioritizing, worth choosing. So when someone shows interest, you lean in hard. You ignore red flags. You excuse inconsistency. You tell yourself, if I love them better, they'll love me back. And when they pull away, it doesn't just hurt, it confirms your worst fear, that you weren't enough. So you try harder, you become more available, more understanding, more forgiving than you should be. You abandon parts of yourself just to keep someone close, and you call it love. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not chasing them. You're chasing the feeling of being wanted. Because when someone loves you, even temporarily, it quiets the voice in your head that says you're unlovable on your own. That's why breakups destroy you. You don't just lose the person, you lose the version of yourself that felt okay for a moment. You lose the distraction. You lose the proof. You lose the illusion that someone else could fix what you haven't faced yet. And that's the part no one wants to admit. Chasing love like this isn't romance. It's avoidance. It's using someone else's attention to avoid learning how to give it to yourself. Because loving yourself is harder than loving someone else. It means sitting with your flaws without asking someone to overlook them. It means choosing yourself without needing applause. It means learning how to feel whole without being held together by another person. And that terrifies you, so you chase love instead. But here's the shift, the part that hurts before it heals. The moment you stop chasing love to fill the emptiness, you start attracting it from a different place. Not desperation, not fear, not self-doubt, but choice. Because real love doesn't arrive to save you. It arrives when you're no longer asking someone else to convince you that you matter. And until you learn to sit with yourself, without distraction, without validation, without escape, every love you chase will feel heavier than it should. You don't need someone to love you harder. You need to stop outsourcing your worth. And when you finally do, love stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like connection. You don't chase love because you're passionate. You chase it because being alone feels unbearable. Because when things get quiet, your thoughts get loud, and they don't tell you kind things. So you look for someone else to sit in that space with you, to distract you, to validate you, to make you feel wanted enough to forget how little you feel about yourself. You don't just want connection, you want relief. Relief from the constant feeling that something about you is missing, that you're behind, that if you were enough, someone would have stayed by now. So when someone shows interest, you grab onto it, you attach fast, you give more than you should, you bend your boundaries before they even ask, not because you're weak, but because being chosen feels like proof. Like if someone wants you, then maybe the voice in your head can finally shut up for a while. You start confusing attention with love, consistency with commitment, chemistry with safety, and when they pull away, it doesn't just hurt, it confirms everything you were afraid of. So you chase harder, you explain more, you forgive more, you accept less. You tell yourself that if you just love them better, they'll love you back the way you need. But what you're really doing is asking someone else to give you a sense of worth you don't know how to give yourself yet. And that's why it feels so desperate, because it's not about them. It's about the fear that without love, you have nothing to stand on. This isn't romance, it's survival. And until you learn how to sit with yourself without needing someone else to make you feel okay, every love you chase will feel heavier than it should. At some point, chasing love turns into abandoning yourself. You stop asking what you need and start asking what they want, how much space to give, how much to hold back, how to be easier to stay with. You shrink in small ways at first. You don't bring things up because you don't want to seem difficult. You accept less effort because at least they're still here. You tell yourself you're being understanding when really you're being afraid that if you ask for more, they'll leave. So you adapt. You become more available than you should, more forgiving than is healthy. You explain away behavior that already made you feel small, and every time you do, you move a little further away from yourself, but you call it love. You tell yourself this is what it means to fight for someone, to be patient, to be loyal. What you don't realize yet is that real love doesn't require you to disappear quietly. The reason chasing feels exhausting is because you're running from your own emptiness. You're hoping someone else will choose you loudly enough to silence the doubt inside you. So when they pull back, your anxiety spikes, you replay conversations, you blame yourself, you look for ways to fix it, not because you were wrong, but because you're terrified of being left alone with yourself again. And that's the cycle. The more you chase, the more you lose your footing. The more you lose yourself, the more you need them to feel okay. That's why it hurts so much. Not because they were everything, but because you made them responsible for holding you together. And no one can carry that forever. This is the part people avoid talking about. Chasing love like this doesn't mean you care deeply. It means you don't feel grounded without external validation. And until you learn how to stand on your own, how to sit with yourself without needing to be chosen, love will keep feeling like something you have to earn instead of something you share. When you chase love from a place of emptiness, you don't attract people who pour into you. You attract people who take, not always intentionally, not always maliciously, but people who sense, even subconsciously, that you're willing to overgive just to stay connected. They feel how flexible you are, how much you're willing to adjust, how far you'll bend before you break. So they let you. They accept your effort without matching it. They enjoy your presence without committing to it. They keep you close enough to benefit from your care, but far enough to avoid responsibility. And because you're chasing, you don't question it at first. You tell yourself this is just how relationships work, that love takes patience, that maybe they just need time. But deep down, something feels off. You're always the one checking in, always the one clarifying, always the one trying to fix the distance that keeps appearing out of nowhere. And instead of asking why they're inconsistent, you ask what you did wrong. That's the trap. Chasing love trains you to blame yourself for other people's lack of effort. You start believing that if someone isn't choosing you, it's because you didn't love them well enough. So you try harder. You give more reassurance, more patience, more access to parts of you that should have been protected, and the dynamic deepens. They stay comfortable, you stay anxious, they get affection without accountability, you get hope without security, and that imbalance keeps repeating until you finally see it for what it is. You're not unlucky in love, you're just chasing from a place that tells the wrong people you'll accept less than you deserve, because people who are capable of real love don't feel comfortable being chased. They meet you halfway. The ones who stay distant, inconsistent, unclear, they stay because the chase benefits them. And until you stop chasing to feel worthy, you'll keep finding yourself in the same story with different faces. Eventually, there's a moment where chasing love stops feeling hopeful and starts feeling exhausting. You realize you're tired, not because love is hard, but because you've been doing all the emotional work alone. You're the one overthinking, the one adjusting, the one trying to hold something together that keeps slipping through your fingers. And for the first time, you ask a quiet question you've been avoiding. Why does love feel like something I have to prove myself worthy of? That question is uncomfortable because it points inward. It forces you to see that chasing love has been a distraction, a way to avoid sitting with yourself, a way to avoid asking why you don't feel enough without someone choosing you. Because as long as you're focused on them, their mixed signals, their distance, their inconsistency, you don't have to face the emptiness underneath. You don't have to ask why you're afraid of being alone, why validation feels necessary, why rejection feels like confirmation instead of redirection. So you keep chasing. But here's the truth that hurts before it heals. Chasing love delays self-healing. Every ounce of energy you spend trying to be chosen is energy you're not spending learning how to choose yourself. And that's why nothing ever feels settled, because no matter who you're with, you're still looking to them to fix something they didn't break. They can't give you security you haven't built internally. They can't love you into self-worth. They can't silence the doubt that existed before they arrived. And once you see that, chasing loses its appeal, not because you stop wanting love, but because you realize love isn't supposed to feel like survival. It's supposed to feel like addition, not rescue. And the moment you stop running from yourself is the moment the chase starts to lose its power. Learning how to sit with yourself is the hardest part of this whole process, because when you stop chasing love, there's nothing left to distract you. No text to wait for, no signals to decode, no person to center your emotions around, just you. And that's when everything you've been avoiding comes to the surface. The insecurity you buried under effort, the loneliness you masked with attachment, the belief that without someone choosing you, you don't really matter. It feels uncomfortable at first, almost unbearable. You reach for your phone instinctively. You miss the chaos, you miss feeling needed, because chasing gave your pain direction, it gave your emptiness a target. Now there's nowhere to run. And this is where most people go back. They re-enter old dynamics, text people they shouldn't, lower their standards just enough to feel wanted again, not because they're weak, but because sitting with yourself requires honesty. It forces you to see that no one abandoned you the way you've been abandoning yourself. Every time you chased someone who was unsure, you told yourself your needs could wait. Every time you accepted inconsistency, you taught yourself to tolerate being half chosen. So being alone feels unfamiliar, not because you can't handle it, but because you've never stayed here long enough to build something solid inside yourself. This is where self-love actually starts, not affirmations, not confidence quotes, but learning how to stay when there's no validation coming in, learning how to comfort yourself instead of outsourcing it, learning how to choose yourself without needing approval. And slowly, something shifts. You stop craving attention. You stop confusing intensity with connection. You stop chasing people who feel familiar for the wrong reasons. Because now, you're no longer running from yourself. And when you stop doing that, love stops feeling like something you need to survive. When you finally start building self-love, the chase doesn't just slow down. It feels wrong. You notice it first in small ways. The anxiety doesn't hook you the same. Inconsistency doesn't feel exciting anymore. It feels draining. People who once felt magnetic now feel loud, unclear, unsafe, and that confuses you because for so long, chaos felt like chemistry. You were drawn to people who kept you guessing because guessing felt familiar, because uncertainty mirrored how unsure you felt about yourself. But now that you're learning how to stand on your own, that dynamic stops working. You don't feel the urge to prove yourself anymore. You don't feel the need to over-explain your worth. And suddenly, chasing feels humiliating, not because you're above it, but because you're finally grounded enough to feel how one-sided it always was. You start wanting different things: clarity instead of sparks, consistency instead of intensity, presence instead of pursuit. You want to be met, not chased or chasing. And here's the part people don't expect. Self-love makes some connections fall apart. People who benefited from your overgiving feel the shift immediately. They sense you're no longer bending, no longer available on demand, no longer trying to earn their attention, and some of them leave. not because you changed for the worse, but because the version of you that chased them is gone. That can hurt, because even when you're healing, loss still feels like loss, but this time it doesn't destroy you, because you're no longer tying your value to someone else's choice. You understand something now. Love that requires chasing is love that feeds on insecurity, and love that's healthy doesn't need pursuit to survive. It shows up, it stays, it chooses you without being convinced, and the more you learn how to love yourself quietly, consistently, honestly, the less tolerance you have for anything that makes you feel like you need to beg to belong. When the chasing finally stops, a new fear shows up. Not the fear of being alone, but the fear of trusting love again without desperation. Because now you're calmer, more grounded, less reactive, and that feels unfamiliar. You're used to love coming with anxiety, with overthinking, with that constant urge to secure someone's attention before it disappears. So when things are steady, part of you doesn't know what to do. You wait for the other shoe to drop. You look for signs something is wrong. You brace yourself for distance that never comes, because chaos used to feel like proof that something mattered. Now peace feels suspicious. You're not chasing anymore, but you're still learning how to receive, how to let someone show up without questioning why, how to accept consistency without trying to earn it. And that's harder than it sounds, because chasing trained you to believe love had to be worked for, that if you weren't doing something, fixing something, proving something, it wouldn't last. So when someone meets you without needing to be convinced, your instinct is to pull back, not because you don't want it, but because you're afraid of trusting something that isn't fueled by fear. This is the quiet stage of healing, where you're not running anymore, but you're not fully relaxed either. You're learning that love doesn't have to feel urgent to be real, that being chosen calmly is still being chosen, and slowly you start letting yourself believe it. You stop checking for exits, stop rehearsing disappointment, stop preparing for abandonment that hasn't happened, because for the first time, you're not chasing to feel worthy. You're standing still and letting love come to you. And that's when you realize how much strength it actually takes to stay. When you stop needing love to save you, everything about it changes. You're not chasing anymore, but you're also not hiding. You're just stable, and that's unfamiliar. You notice how different it feels to want someone instead of needing them. There's no panic behind it, no urgency, no feeling that if this doesn't work out, you'll fall apart. And that scares you in a new way, because chasing gave you purpose. It gave your emotions somewhere to go. It made love feel intense, consuming, alive. Now love feels quieter, not empty, just grounded. You don't lose yourself in people anymore. You don't rearrange your life to keep someone interested. You don't abandon your needs to avoid being left. And because of that, you become harder to hook, not emotionally unavailable, just unavailable to dynamics that require you to shrink. You start noticing things you used to ignore, how someone responds to boundaries, how they handle consistency, how they show up when you're not overgiving. And if they fade when you stop chasing, you don't panic, you understand. They weren't there for you. They were there for the version of you that was always reaching. That realization hurts, but it also frees you. Because now you know love that disappears when you stop chasing was never love meant to stay. This is where self-love changes the rules. You don't try to be impressive, you don't try to be indispensable, you don't try to secure someone's feelings. You let them show you who they are when you're not doing all the work, and for the first time, love feels optional, not because it doesn't matter, but because your worth no longer depends on it. You're not chasing to fill a void anymore. You're choosing from a place that already feels whole, and that's when love stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like something you can welcome without losing yourself. Healing doesn't just bring relief, it brings grief, because when you stop chasing love, you don't just lose old dynamics, you lose the version of yourself who survived by reaching. You look back at who you were and feel a strange mix of sadness and compassion. You remember how hard you tried, how much you gave, how badly you wanted to be chosen, and part of you wants to go back, not because it was healthy, but because it was familiar. Chasing gave you direction. It gave your pain something to focus on. It made loneliness feel purposeful. Now that version of you is gone, and that hurts. You grieve the person who believed love had to be earned, who thought being enough meant being useful, agreeable, easy to keep. You grieve the nights you waited, the messages you rewrote, the boundaries you swallowed just to stay connected, not because you were weak, but because you didn't know another way yet. And healing means accepting something painful. No one did this to you. You did it because you didn't know how to hold yourself without being held. That realization can feel brutal because it removes the villain. There's no one left to blame, just patterns you learn to survive something deeper. So you sit with it, with the sadness, with the regret, with the understanding that you were doing the best you could with what you knew at the time. And slowly, that grief turns into respect. Respect for how much you endured, for how deeply you wanted love, for how brave it was to keep believing, even in the wrong places. You don't hate the old version of you. You thank them because they carried you until you were strong enough to stop chasing and start choosing yourself. And that's what makes this stage heavy. You're not broken anymore, but you're still letting go. The chase ends the moment you stop asking love to fix you, not because you stop wanting connection, but because you stop needing it to feel whole. You finally understand something simple that took you years to learn. Love was never supposed to be proof that you matter. It was never meant to carry your worth, never meant to quiet your self-doubt, never meant to save you from yourself. That was too much to ask of anyone. So you stopped chasing, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in clarity. You stop running after people who make you feel uncertain. Stop explaining your needs to people who don't listen. Stop overgiving just to feel chosen, because now being chosen by yourself comes first. You learn how to sit with silence without panicking, how to be alone without feeling abandoned, how to exist without needing constant reassurance, and something changes. Love no longer feels urgent, it no longer feels like survival. It no longer feels like something you have to secure before it disappears. It becomes optional, not because it's unimportant, but because your life no longer collapses without it. And that's when the real shift happens. You don't attract love from desperation anymore. You don't bond through wounds. You don't mistake intensity for connection. You choose slowly. You choose clearly. You choose from a place that isn't begging to be filled. And if someone doesn't meet you there, you don't chase. You let them go, not because you don't care, but because you care enough about yourself to stop repeating the same pain with different people. The version of you that chased love wasn't weak. They were hurting, they were lonely, they were trying to survive. But this version of you, this version doesn't run. They stand still, they breathe. They choose themselves even when no one is watching. And from here on out, love won't feel like something you have to earn. It'll feel like something you share with someone who meets you without being chased. That's where the cycle ends. Not with finding love, but with finally finding yourself. I don't think I ever wanted too much. I didn't need perfection. I didn't need constant attention. I didn't need someone to save me. I just wanted to be cared for. I wanted someone who noticed when I went quiet, someone who checked in without being asked, someone who didn't treat my presence like something optional. But every time I tried to explain that, it sounded like neediness, like I was asking for too much. So I stayed quiet. I accepted less. I told myself I was independent enough to not need reassurance, but deep down that wasn't true. I wasn't asking to be obsessed over. I wasn't asking to be put on a pedestal. I was asking to matter, to feel like my absence would be noticed, like my feelings would be considered, like I didn't have to earn basic care by being easy, understanding, or low maintenance. And every time I didn't get that, I told myself it was fine, that this is just how people are, that expecting care is unrealistic. that I should be grateful for whatever effort showed up, but wanting to be cared for doesn't make you weak. It means you're human. It means you want a connection where effort is mutual and presence isn't forced. And the hardest part is realizing how long you stayed in places where you felt invisible just because you didn't want to seem like you needed too much. I didn't want someone to fix me. I just wanted someone who cared enough to stay aware of me. At some point, wanting to be cared for turns into accepting the bare minimum. You stop asking questions, stop expressing needs, stop pointing out what hurts, because every time you do, it feels like you're asking for too much. So you adjust, you get excited over replies that should be normal, you appreciate effort that should be consistent, you thank people for things they do effortlessly if they truly cared, and you tell yourself this is just how love works. But deep down you feel it, the imbalance, the quiet disappointment, the way you're always the one paying attention. You're not asking for grand gestures, you're asking for awareness, to be checked on, to be considered, to feel like your emotions aren't an inconvenience, but instead you keep shrinking your expectations to fit what people are willing to give. You call it being low maintenance, being understanding, being independent, when really you're just afraid that if you ask for more, you'll lose what little you have. And that's the part that hurts, because you don't want more love, you just want the love that's already there to show up consistently. You don't want to beg for care, you want it to be natural. And the longer you settle, the more you start questioning yourself. Am I too sensitive? Am I needy? Am I wrong for wanting this? But wanting to be cared for was never the problem. Staying where you're barely noticed is. Pretending you don't need care slowly disconnects you from yourself. You start ignoring your own feelings before anyone else can. You tell yourself you're fine even when you're not. You swallow disappointment and call it maturity, because admitting you want care feels risky. It feels like giving someone power to decide whether you're too much, so you choose silence instead. You become the easy one, the understanding one, the one who doesn't ask for reassurance or consistency or emotional presence. And people like that version of you, because it asks for nothing, but inside something starts to dull. You feel lonely even when you're not alone. You feel unseen even when someone's there. You start questioning whether your needs are even valid anymore. That's when you know you've gone too far. Not by wanting care, but by convincing yourself you don't deserve it. You weren't meant to love people from a distance. You weren't meant to be strong at the cost of being felt. Care isn't weakness. Wanting it isn't dependency. It's connection. And the moment you deny yourself that truth, you don't just lose it from others, you lose it from yourself. There's a moment where it finally hits you. You've been caring for everyone else while no one was really caring for you. You remember how often you checked in, how often you noticed shifts in tone, how often you adjusted yourself to make things easier for others, and then you look back and realize how rarely anyone did that for you. No one asked if you were okay when you went quiet. No one noticed when your energy changed. No one slowed down enough to really see you. And that realization hurts in a quiet, heavy way, because you weren't asking for perfection. You weren't asking to be prioritized above everything. You were asking for reciprocity. To feel like your presence mattered as much as you made theirs matter. That's when the exhaustion sets in. Not physical tiredness, emotional fatigue. The kind that comes from always being the one who cares first, who understands more, who gives grace even when it costs you. You start wondering how you became so good at holding space for people who never learned how to hold it for you. And the truth is uncomfortable. You taught them it was okay to lean on you without leaning back, to receive care without returning it, not because you wanted imbalance, but because you didn't want to feel abandoned. And realizing that is both painful and clarifying, because it shows you something important. You weren't asking for too much, you were just asking it from the wrong people. That realization changes how you choose people. You stop being impressed by words. You stop getting attached to potential. You stop mistaking attention for care, because now you know the difference. Care looks like consistency. It looks like remembering. It looks like showing up even when it's not convenient. So you start paying attention to who checks in without being prompted, who notices when you're off, who doesn't make you explain why you need what you need. And at first that makes your circle smaller. You walk away from people you once would have stayed for. You stop overextending. You stop being the only one holding things together. Not because you don't care anymore, but because you finally care about yourself too. You don't chase care now. You don't hint at it. You don't downplay your needs to make someone comfortable. You let people show you how they show up. And if they don't, you don't argue with it. You don't try to teach them how to care. You accept the information and move accordingly, because wanting to be cared for isn't a flaw, it's a boundary. And the moment you start honoring it, you realize something important. You'd rather be alone than be surrounded and still feel unseen. Choosing yourself feels lonely at first, not because you made the wrong choice, but because you stopped filling the silence with people who never really saw you. You notice the absence quickly, the lack of constant conversation, the quiet that comes when you're no longer overgiving just to stay connected. And that quiet can be uncomfortable because for a long time, being needed made you feel valued. Being available made you feel important. Being the one who cared most made you feel like you belonged. Now you don't do that anymore. You don't reach out first every time. You don't check in when it's never returned. You don't hold space for people who won't hold it for you. And yes, that leaves gaps, but those gaps feel different than the loneliness you had before. Before you were lonely even when surrounded by people. Now you're alone but at peace. There's no resentment building, no quiet disappointment, no wondering why you're not enough. Just space to breathe, space to feel what you feel, space to rebuild a relationship with yourself that isn't based on neglect. You start realizing that loneliness with self-respect is lighter than connection without care. And once you taste that peace, it's hard to go back, because you finally understand being cared for starts with not abandoning yourself anymore. Learning how to receive care is harder than giving it. That part surprised me. I was always good at showing up, at checking in, at being thoughtful without being asked. But when someone tried to do that for me, I didn't know how to relax into it. I questioned it. I downplayed it. I felt uncomfortable being the one who was noticed, because for so long, care felt conditional, like something you earned by being useful, easy, understanding. So when someone offers it freely, without you proving anything, your first instinct is to brace yourself. You wait for it to disappear, you look for the catch, you assume it won't last, and that's not because you don't want care. It's because you're not used to it being consistent. You're used to being the giver, the supporter, the one who adapts. So receiving feels vulnerable in a way giving never did. It means letting someone see you without performing, letting yourself need without apologizing, letting care exist without questioning your worthiness of it. That takes unlearning. Takes time to believe that you don't have to exhaust yourself to deserve tenderness. And I'm still learning that, still reminding myself that care doesn't have to be chased, earned, or negotiated. Sometimes it's just there, and allowing it in is the bravest thing you can do after spending so long surviving without it. At some point, you stop asking why people don't care. You stop replaying conversations, stop analyzing tone, stop wondering what you could have done differently, because that question only keeps you stuck chasing explanations instead of truth. So you ask a different question: who actually shows up for me? Not who says they care, not who means well, not who shows interest when it's easy, but who checks in consistently, who notices when you're quiet, who doesn't disappear when you need space or reassurance or time. And the answer is usually smaller than you expect: fewer people, less noise, more clarity. That realization hurts, but it also simplifies everything. You stop pouring into people who only take. You stop investing in connections that leave you feeling unseen. You don't make announcements. You don't explain your shift. You just move differently. You protect your energy. You reserve your care for those who return it naturally. And slowly you stop feeling desperate to be noticed because you're no longer surrounding yourself with people who make you feel invisible. Care stops being something you beg for and starts being something you recognize. And that's when you finally understand being cared for isn't about convincing people to treat you better. It's about choosing the ones who already do. Wanting to be cared for doesn't make you needy. It makes you honest. Needy is asking someone to fill a void they didn't create. Needy is expecting one person to carry everything for you. But wanting care, that's wanting reciprocity. That's wanting your effort to be met, your presence to be valued, your emotions to be considered. You're not asking someone to revolve their life around you. You're asking them to see you. And somewhere along the way, you were taught that asking for that was too much. So you minimized yourself. You softened your needs. You told yourself independence meant not needing anything from anyone. But that wasn't strength. That was self-denial, because even the strongest people need to feel cared for sometimes, need to feel noticed, need to feel like their existence matters to someone else. You don't want care because you can't survive without it. You want it because connection is part of being human. And the moment you stop shaming yourself for wanting that, everything changes. You stop apologizing for your needs. You stop pretending you're okay with being overlooked. You stop accepting crumbs just to feel included. You realize something important. You're not asking for too much. You're asking the wrong people. At the end of all this, I realized something simple. Wanting to be cared for is not something I negotiate anymore. I'm done explaining why it matters, done justifying why I feel hurt, done shrinking my needs so someone else can stay comfortable. Care is not a bonus, it's not extra, it's not something you earn by being quiet, easy, or low maintenance. It's the baseline. If someone doesn't notice me, doesn't check in, doesn't consider how their actions affect me, then they don't get access to me. Not out of bitterness, not out of anger, out of self-respect. I spent too long convincing myself that wanting care made me weak, too long accepting half presence and calling it connection, too long staying where I felt invisible, just to avoid being alone. I'm not doing that anymore. I don't need to be chased. I don't need to be obsessed over. I just need to be considered. And if someone can't do that naturally, without me begging, hinting, or explaining, then they're not my person. Because the right people won't make you feel guilty for wanting to matter. They won't make care feel conditional. They won't make you question whether you're asking for too much. They'll just show up. And until that happens, I'd rather stand alone with my needs intact than sit beside someone who makes me feel unseen. I didn't want too much. I just wanted to be cared for. And now I care enough about myself to never accept less again. You act like watching porn, feeding into lust, and constantly chasing that quick release isn't that big of a deal. Like it's harmless. Like it's something everyone does, so it can't really be affecting you that much. But the truth is, it slowly puts you in a cycle you don't even realize you're stuck in until it already has a grip on you. It becomes a dopamine loop. You feel stressed, bored, lonely, or uncomfortable, so you look for something that gives you instant relief. And it works for a moment. Your brain gets that hit. You feel calm, satisfied, distracted, but then it fades. And instead of facing what you were avoiding in the first place, you go right back to chasing that same feeling again, over and over. The problem isn't just the habit itself, it's what it replaces. When your brain gets used to easy pleasure, hard things start to feel unbearable. Discipline feels heavier, motivation feels weaker, the goals you used to care about don't excite you the same way. You start putting off the things that actually build your life because they don't give you that immediate reward. You stop chasing the things that truly make you happy, real progress, real connection, purpose, growth. You tell yourself you'll get serious tomorrow, you'll lock in next week, week, you'll change eventually, but that cycle keeps you comfortable enough to stay stuck. And here's the part people don't like to talk about. Lust in excess usually isn't about desire. It's about emptiness. It's about trying to fill something inside of you that feels hollow. A lack of intimacy, a lack of direction, a lack of fulfillment. And intimacy doesn't always come from something sexual. It can come from faith, from deep friendships, from family, from working towards something bigger than yourself. Every craving is information. When you feel that pull, it's a signal. Something in your life needs attention. Something needs healing. And the more you numb that signal with instant gratification, the longer you delay becoming who you're supposed to be. This isn't about shame. This isn't about pretending urges don't exist. It's about awareness and control. It's about choosing long-term fulfillment over short-term comfort, because comfort can quietly ruin your life if you let it. I'm saying this because I've been there, I've lived in that cycle, and breaking out of it doesn't magically make life easy, but it makes it real again. You start feeling hunger for progress, you start feeling pride and discipline, you start enjoying the process of becoming better instead of escaping from yourself. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be honest. Honest about what's holding you back, honest about what you're avoiding, and brave enough to sit with discomfort long enough to grow through it. The things that truly change your life are rarely comfortable, but they are always worth it. Being a teenager and going through this, it's different because it's your first time feeling everything this deeply. The first time you stay up late just to talk to someone. The first time your mood depends on a notification. The first time you actually care if someone stays or leaves, and you don't even realize how much it's affecting you at the time. You just think, this is what it's supposed to feel like, so you give everything. Your time, your attention, your energy, because to you at that age, you don't know how to control how much you feel. Nobody teaches you that. There's no balance, no take it slow. You just go all in without even realizing it. Because when something feels real for the first time, you don't question it. You don't think about protecting yourself. You don't think about what could go wrong. You don't think about whether the other person feels the same way. You just feel it. And you let it take over everything. Your whole day starts revolving around them. You wake up and check your phone first thing. You wait for their message like it actually means something. You reread conversations like there's something hidden in them. And the craziest part, you don't even notice how deep you're getting. It feels normal. It feels like this is just what liking someone is supposed to be. And when they give you attention, it hits different at that age, because it's not just attention, it's validation. It's the feeling of being chosen, the feeling that out of everyone they're picking you to talk to laugh with, to spend time on. And when you haven't felt that before, it becomes everything. That's why you start giving more time, more energy, more of yourself. You stay up later than you should just to talk to them. You ignore other things just to keep the conversation going. You make space for them in your life without even realizing how much space you're giving. And in your head, you think it's mutual. You think they feel it the same way you do. Because why wouldn't they? They're replying. They're talking. They're there. So it must mean something, right? But that's the part nobody tells you when you're younger. Just because someone is there doesn't mean they're there the same way you are. And you don't realize that yet. Not until things start changing. And when things start changing, you don't accept it right away. You feel it, but you don't accept it. Because at that age, your first instinct isn't to walk away, it's to hold on tighter. You start overthinking everything. Why did they reply slower? Why do they seem different? Did I do something wrong? And instead of pulling back, you lean in. You text more. You try harder to keep the conversation alive. You become more available, more understanding, more patient. Because in your head, if something is slipping, you don't let go. You fix it. But what you don't realize is you're the only one trying to fix something. And that's where it starts to hurt. Not all at once, slowly. You start noticing the little things, the way they don't text like they used to, the way conversations feel shorter, the way you're the one carrying most of it now, and it's confusing, because just a little while ago, everything felt easy. So you keep chasing that version, the version of them that made you feel wanted, the version that stayed up late with you, the version that made it feel like you mattered. And every time they show a little bit of that again, it resets everything. You think, okay, it's back. You think maybe it was just a phase, maybe you were overthinking, maybe everything is fine. But it never stays. It comes back for a moment, then disappears again. And that's when you start feeling something you've never really felt before. Not just sadness, not just confusion, but the feeling of caring more than someone else. And when that hits you for the first time, at that age, it changes you. That feeling of caring more than someone else, it's something you don't understand the first time it happens. Because in your head, you're thinking, how can I care this much and they don't feel the same? It doesn't make sense. You replay everything, all the conversations, all the late nights, all the moments that felt real, and you start questioning all of it. You wonder if you imagined it, if you read too deep into things, if you made something bigger than it actually was. Because how does something feel that real and still end up one-sided? So you try to fix it, not directly, but in small ways. You change how you text, you try to be more interesting, you try to say the right things, you become more aware of everything you do, because now you're trying to hold on to something that's already slipping. And the worst part is, they don't even realize what you're going through. To them, it's just a shift, just a change in how they feel. But to you, it feels like everything is falling apart, because at that age, you don't separate your feelings from your identity. If someone pulls away, you don't just think they change. You think, what's wrong with me? And that question stays in your head, quietly, in the background. Every time they reply late, every time they seem distant, every time you feel like you're trying harder than they are, you start shrinking yourself without noticing, trying to fit into what you think they'll stay for, trying to be enough in a way that makes them come back. But no one tells you this when you're younger. You can't fix someone losing feelings by changing yourself, and that's the part you learn the hard way. That's when it really starts to change you. Not just how you feel about them, but how you start seeing yourself. Because once you feel like you're not enough for someone, that thought doesn't just stay in that situation. It follows you. You start second-guessing everything. The way you talk, the way you act, the way you show up. You think maybe you were too much, too available, too caring, too real. So you start holding back. Not because you want to, but because now you're scared of feeling that same way again. And the crazy part is, they probably don't even realize the impact they had. To them, it was just something that didn't work out, just a phase, just someone they talked to for a while. But to you, it was your first time feeling something real, your first time getting attached like that, your first time learning what it feels like to lose someone emotionally before you even fully had them. And that sticks with you, because now you know what it feels like to give everything and not get it back the same way. So the next time something like that comes around, you're not the same. You hesitate, you think more, you hold back parts of yourself you used to give freely. And that's when your teenage years start teaching you something nobody explains to you directly. Not everyone you feel something real with is meant to stay. After that, you start realizing something you didn't understand before. Not everyone feels things the same way you do. Because in your mind, if something feels real, it should mean something. It should last. It should turn into something more. But reality doesn't always work like that. Someone can talk to you every day, laugh with you, stay up late with you, make you feel like you matter, and still not feel it the same way you do. And that's confusing when you're younger, because you don't understand how something can feel so real and still not be real to them. So you start questioning everything, not just them, but the whole idea of what you felt. You think, was it even real? Did I just imagine it? Did I care more than I should have? But the truth is, it was real. just not equal. And that's a hard lesson to learn that early, because now you're not just dealing with feelings, you're dealing with imbalance. You start realizing you are the one initiating more, the one caring more, the one thinking about them more, the one building something in your head that they were just experiencing in the moment. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. That's when things shift inside you. Not loudly, but quietly. You stop looking at it like something that ended and start seeing it for what it actually was. Something that meant more to you than it ever did to them. And once that realization settles in, you start changing in ways you don't even notice at first. You're not as quick to open up anymore. You don't say everything on your mind like you used to. You don't give your time as freely, because now you've seen what happens when you do. Not that you don't care anymore, it's that you care differently, more carefully, more guarded. Because before, you didn't think twice about it. If you liked someone, you showed it. If you cared, you gave it fully. No hesitation, no second guessing. But now, there's a pause, a moment where you think, is this even worth it? And that pause comes from experience, from that first time you gave everything and realized it didn't guarantee anything. So now you move smarter, you watch actions more, you notice effort more, you pay attention to how someone shows up, not just what they say. And even though it makes you more aware, there's a small part of you that misses how you used to be, the version of you that didn't overthink, the version that just felt things fully without fear, the version that believed if something felt real, that means something, because that version of you was pure, unfiltered, real in a way that's hard to get back once it changes. But that's what growing up during those years does to you. It doesn't just give you memories, it gives you awareness. And sometimes that awareness comes from learning things the hard way. After a while, you stop blaming them, and you stop blaming yourself. Because at that age, nobody really knows what they're doing, not fully. They don't know how to handle someone who cares deeply. They don't know how to communicate properly. They don't know how to leave without hurting someone. And you don't know how to protect yourself yet. So everything becomes intense. The good feels really good. The bad feels really bad. There's no balance, just highs and lows. And looking back, you start realizing something important. It wasn't meant to last. It was meant to teach you. It taught you what effort looks like, what inconsistency feels like, what it means to care more than someone else, and most importantly, it taught you what you should never accept again. Because once you've felt that imbalance, you recognize it faster next time. You don't stay as long. You don't ignore the signs as easily. Not because you don't care anymore, but because now you understand your value a little more than you did before. And that's the shift. You're not the same person you were at the start of it. You're more aware, more careful, more intentional. And even though it came from something that hurt, that growth, that stays. And when you look back on it later, you don't just remember the person. You remember the version of you that existed during that time. The version of you that felt everything without holding back. The version of you that stayed up late just to talk to someone. The version of you that gave your time, your energy, your attention without thinking twice about it. And yeah, that version of you got hurt, got confused, got left trying to understand something that didn't make sense. But that doesn't make it a mistake. It makes it real. Because those teenage years, they're not just about what happens. They're about what you learn from it. You learn that not everyone stays. You learn that feelings aren't always equal. You learn that just because something feels real doesn't mean it's meant to last. But you also learn something more important than all of that. You learn how deeply you can care, how real you can be, how much you're capable of giving when you're fully invested in someone. And that's not something to regret, that's something to take with you. Because one day, you'll meet someone who matches that energy, someone who doesn't make you question it, someone who doesn't make you feel like you're too much or not enough. And when that happens, everything you went through back then will finally make sense. Because those teenage years didn't break you. They built you into someone who knows the difference between something that feels real and something that actually is. If you ever find yourself feeling insecure about the way you look or the way you exist in this world, I want you to pause for a second and really think about this. You are the result of thousands of generations of people who chose love. People who met, connected, cared for each other, and decided to keep going. Every single one of them led to you being here right now. And that alone is something incredibly powerful. I know this idea gets mentioned a lot, but that doesn't make it any less meaningful. Sometimes the most repeated truths are the ones we forget the fastest. You didn't just appear randomly. Your existence is layered with history, emotion, resilience, and connection. Every feature you have, every trait you carry, every part of you is proof that love existed long before you did. You are a beautiful person, not just on the outside, but in the way you carry yourself, the way you think, the way you feel deeply. You are a beautiful soul, and whether you believe it or not right now, people are drawn to you. That's not wishful thinking. That's real. The energy you bring, the presence you have, the way you make others feel seen or understood, those things matter more than you realize. It's easy to let outside voices mess with your perception of yourself. A comment, a comparison, a moment of rejection can make you forget everything good about who you are. But anyone who makes you feel small, unworthy, or unlovable is not someone you should be listening to. Their words do not define you. Their inability to see your value does not take it away. You don't need to look like anyone else. You don't need to act like anyone else. You don't need to change yourself to be deserving of love or appreciation. You already are exactly as you are. The right people will see that without you having to prove anything. Let this video be a reminder today. A quiet one, not a loud or overwhelming one. Just a gentle reminder that you matter, that you are enough, and that your existence is not accidental. Take a moment to breathe this in. Let it sit with you. Let it soften the way you talk to yourself for the rest of the day. You are here because love brought you here, and that alone makes you something special. Losing the person who was part of your daily routine is a different kind of pain. Not just losing them emotionally, but losing the version of life that existed with them in it. Every morning felt automatic. Wake up, grab your phone, text her good morning without even thinking about it. Sometimes you'd FaceTime right after. Sometimes you'd meet her at school, walk together, laugh about nothing, complain about everything. It wasn't just love, it was habit, it was comfort, it was routine. And when someone is woven into your day like that, when they're built into the structure of your life for months, losing them doesn't just hurt, it disrupts everything. Especially when that person was your best friend. The one you called whenever something went wrong. The one you didn't hesitate to reach out to. The moment a problem entered your mind, you already knew who you were calling. Advice, reassurance, ideas, they were your first option every time, and now you still reach for your phone out of instinct, only to remember you can't call them anymore. You can't text them like before. You can't talk it out the way you used to. That connection is gone, and the silence feels heavier than any argument ever did. Or maybe it was your girlfriend. The person you did everything with. The movies, the random food runs, the plans you assumed would always include her. A new movie comes out, and for a split second your brain says, let's go see it together. Then reality hits. You broke up, you're blocked, she's no longer accessible, not online, not in real life, not in the way she used to be. And what nobody really talks about is how your body remembers them too. Your body got used to that text tone. Every notification used to feel like it might be her. Your heart would jump without you even realizing why. Now your phone buzzes, and it's just a bill reminder or some random notification that doesn't mean anything. And you sit there staring at your screen, realizing how much changed when she was in your life, and how empty the routine feels without her. Your days don't flow the same anymore. The structure is gone. The familiarity is gone. The person who anchored so many moments is no longer there to hold them together. And maybe the hardest part of all is accepting that you have to learn how to live life alone again. Not because you want to, but because the routine you built with them no longer exists. I feel like every guy has that one girl who broke his heart. And no matter how much time passes, no matter how much healing he does, there's always going to be a soft spot for her. You'll never truly hate her. You'll never completely erase her from your life. You might stop chasing her. You might stop trying to prove yourself. But the connection you had with her, that never fully dies. Or maybe you just never let it. And I don't know why this happens, but a lot of the time when a girl breaks your heart, she still wants to stay friends. Now, most guys don't want that. Being friends with someone who shattered shattered you isn't easy. It's confusing, but somehow there's always that one girl where the rules don't apply. No matter how much pain she caused, no matter how much she hurt you, intentionally or not, you still make room for her in your heart. When she texts, you reply, maybe not instantly, but faster than you should. And sometimes, without realizing it, you start putting her above yourself. You're there for her problems, her bad days, her heartbreaks, even when you know deep down that if the roles were reversed, she wouldn't do the same for you. And that's the part that hurts the most, because you're not doing it because you're weak, you're doing it because you loved her genuinely, because at one point she meant everything to you. A lot of the time it's that first girl you truly fell in love with, the first one who made you feel seen, the first one who felt like home, and letting her go completely feels impossible. Sometimes holding on to that connection feels comforting, sometimes it feels like self-destruction. So just understand this. There's nothing wrong with caring, there's nothing wrong with loving deeply, but you have to recognize when that love is being taken advantage of. Don't let the feelings you still have for her, or the bond you're scared to lose, be the reason you keep hurting yourself, because the girl who broke your heart should never be the one who keeps breaking it. Why is receiving love so hard? I give it so easily, without thinking, without hesitation, but somehow it never seems to find its way back to me. I watch people love each other so effortlessly, laughing, holding hands, belonging to one another like it's the most natural thing in the world, and I can't help but wonder what that feels like. To be chosen, to be wanted, to be loved the way I love. Because somehow I'm always the giver, the one who listens, the one who shows up, the one who makes sure everyone else feels cared for. I pour into people like it's my purpose, but when it's my turn, everyone suddenly forgets how to pour back. And I tell myself it's fine. I tell myself I don't need much. I convince myself that being the strong one or the understanding one is enough. But deep down there's this quiet ache, this tiny voice that whispers, when is it going to be my turn? When will someone love me the way I love them? When will someone choose me without hesitation? I'm not asking for grand gestures. I'm not asking for perfection. I just want to feel like I matter to someone the same way I make them matter to me. Because giving love is easy. Receiving it, that's the part that feels almost impossible. But still, I wait. I hope, I believe that one day someone will see me, really see me, and finally choose me the way I've always chosen everyone else. You keep ignoring the red flags because all you want is love. Not peace, not respect, not consistency, just love. You see the signs, you see the unanswered calls, the constant busy, the way you're always an option, never a priority. And instead of asking why it hurts, you ask how to endure it. You tell yourself it's patience, that it's loyalty, that love means staying even when it costs you. But let's be honest, she doesn't check on you. She doesn't consider your feelings. She doesn't show up the way you do. And you know that. You just don't want to face what it says about you for staying. So here's the real question you've been avoiding. How much do you actually love yourself? Because when you stay in situations that keep hurting you, when you keep accepting disrespect just to feel close to someone, that's not love. That's neglect. If you truly loved yourself, you wouldn't keep choosing pain just to feel wanted. You wouldn't keep lowering your standards to keep someone around who clearly isn't choosing you back. But you don't protect yourself, you sacrifice yourself. Because being alone scares you more than being hurt. And that's why you accept the bare minimum. That's why you stay in toxic cycles. That's why you confuse attachment with love. You're not holding on because it's good for you. You're holding on because it's the only version of love you think you deserve. And that's the lie. You don't need someone else to complete you. What you actually need is to stop outsourcing your worth. Because the moment you start loving yourself, really loving yourself, you stop begging for attention. You stop tolerating disrespect. You stop calling pain connection. You stop chasing people who only show up halfway. Self-love doesn't make you selfish. It makes you unavailable to anything that keeps breaking you. And until you learn that, you'll keep calling suffering love and calling survival loyalty. You are worth more than crumbs. You are worth more than confusion. You are worth more than being an option. But no one can convince you of that until you decide to believe it yourself. Here's the truth you keep avoiding. You don't stay because you don't see the red flags. You stay because you think leaving means nobody else will love you. So you make excuses. She's busy. She's going through stuff. She just doesn't show love the same way. But effort isn't a love language. It's a choice. And when someone keeps choosing not to show up for you, that's not confusion, that's clarity. You're not being patient. You're being hopeful in a place that's already shown you who it is. You keep giving grace to people who wouldn't give you the same. You keep explaining your pain to someone who already decided it wasn't important enough to change. And every time you stay, you send yourself a message. My feelings come second. My needs are optional. This is the best I can get. That's not love. That's self-betrayal. You think walking away means losing them, but what you're really losing right now is respect for yourself, because someone who values you doesn't make you question your worth. They don't make you beg for consistency. They don't disappear and call it space. And the reason this keeps happening isn't because you love too hard. It's because you don't love yourself hard enough to leave when you should. The moment you start choosing yourself, red flags stop looking like obstacles and start looking like exits. And exits aren't failures, they're protection. Ignoring red flags doesn't just hurt you once, it trains people how to treat you. Every time you stay after disrespect, you teach them you'll tolerate it. Every time you forgive without change, you show them your boundaries don't mean much, and they adjust accordingly. They respond less. They try less, they care just enough to keep you around, but never enough to show up fully. Because why would they? You already proved you'll stay without effort. You think you're being understanding, but what you're really doing is normalizing behavior that shouldn't have access to you. You answer late replies immediately. You accept apologies without accountability. You let patterns repeat because you're afraid of starting over, and slowly, your standards drop while their comfort rises. That's the trade you're making. You're giving someone emotional safety while you live in emotional uncertainty. And the worst part? You start blaming yourself. You tell yourself you're asking for too much, that you're sensitive, that this is just how relationships are. But healthy love doesn't require endurance. You don't have to survive it. You don't have to fight for basic respect. You don't have to convince someone to treat you well. Red flags aren't challenges to overcome. They're warnings to listen to, and the longer you ignore them, the harder it becomes to remember what being valued even feels like. The pattern doesn't break when they change, it breaks when you do. The reason you keep ignoring red flags is because you confuse attachment with love. Love feels steady, attachment feels urgent. Love doesn't make you anxious. Attachment keeps you checking your phone, replaying conversations, wondering where you stand, and you call that passion. But what you're really feeling is fear. Fear of being replaced, fear of not being enough, fear that if you don't hold on tight, you'll be forgotten. So you cling, you stay when you should leave, you wait when there's nothing coming. You accept excuses because they're easier than facing the truth. That truth being, someone who wants you won't make you feel optional. Attachment makes you chase because it needs reassurance. Love doesn't chase, it meets. And until you learn the difference, every red flag will feel like something you just need to work through. You'll keep calling distance space, disrespect miscommunication, inconsistency timing, but your body already knows that tight feeling in your chest, that constant unease, that feeling of giving more than you're getting. That's not love warning you to try harder. That's your self-respect telling you to stop. You don't need clearer signs. You don't need closure. You don't need one more conversation. You need the courage to admit that attachment is keeping you stuck in places love would never ask you to stay. Walking away feels harder than staying because staying lets you avoid the truth. As long as you're still there, you can tell yourself it might change, that maybe tomorrow they'll care more, that maybe you're just being tested. Hope keeps you stuck because leaving means admitting you invested in something that wasn't good for you. It means admitting you ignored your instincts, that you stayed longer than you should have, that you loved someone who couldn't meet you halfway, and that hurts your pride. So instead, you endure, you tell yourself pain is temporary, that love requires sacrifice, that every relationship has rough patches. But here's the part you don't want to hear. Love doesn't consistently make you feel small. It doesn't drain you. It doesn't confuse you. It doesn't make you feel like you're asking for too much just by wanting basic respect. You stay because leaving forces accountability, not for them, but for you. It forces you to ask why you accepted less, why you ignored the signs, why you stayed quiet when your boundaries were crossed. And that's uncomfortable. But staying is costing you more than leaving ever will. Every day you remain in a situation that disrespects you, you reinforce the belief that this is all you deserve, and that belief is the real damage. Walking away isn't giving up on love, it's giving up on self-betrayal. And the moment you finally choose yourself, red flags stop feeling confusing. They feel obvious. The moment you stop ignoring red flags, everything gets quiet. No chaos, no anxiety spikes, no constant checking to see if someone still wants you. And at first, that silence feels uncomfortable because you're used to confusion, used to emotional ups and downs, used to love feeling like something you have to manage. So when you finally walk away, your brain starts questioning you. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe this is just how love feels. But that's just withdrawal. You're not missing them. You're missing the familiarity of the pattern, because ignoring red flags wasn't just about them. It was about what you were willing to tolerate to avoid being alone. Now that you've chosen yourself, you start seeing things clearly. You realize how drained you were, how often you made excuses, how little you were actually asking for compared to how much you were giving, and that clarity changes you. You don't feel pulled toward inconsistency anymore. You don't chase mixed signals. You don't feel tempted by people who only show up halfway. Because once you experience peace, chaos stops feeling exciting. You stop romanticizing struggle. You stop believing love has to hurt. You stop confusing anxiety with connection. And here's the biggest shift. You stop trying to be chosen. You start choosing. Who gets access to you? Who gets your time? Who gets your emotional energy? Red flags don't feel like puzzles anymore. They feel like answers. And instead of asking me, can I make this work? You ask, does this protect me? That's when self-respect kicks in. Not loud, not dramatic, just firm. When you stop ignoring red flags, people from your past don't recognize you anymore. Not because you changed for the worse, but because you stopped being convenient. You don't explain yourself as much. You don't over-justify your boundaries. You don't stay in conversations that feel disrespectful or draining, and that confuses people. They're used to the version of you that stayed quiet, that gave chances, that tried to understand at the expense of being understood. So when you walk away faster now, they call you cold. They say you've changed. They say you're doing too much. But what they really mean is you're no longer available for the dynamic they benefited from. People who thrived on your tolerance don't like your standards. People who were comfortable with your silence don't like your clarity. And that's okay, because growth isn't about being liked, it's about being protected. You're not harsh, you're not bitter, you're not closed off. You're just done negotiating your self-respect. You no longer wait for disrespect to become unbearable before leaving. You don't need proof anymore. The first pattern is enough. And here's the part that matters most. The right people won't question this version of you. They won't push your boundaries. They won't test your tolerance. They won't need you to over-explain. They'll feel your standards and meet them naturally. Anyone who leaves because you stopped accepting red flags was never meant to stay anyway. That's not loss, that's alignment. Self-respect feels lonely at first, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you stopped tolerating what everyone else normalized. You don't have constant access to people anymore. You don't have drama to distract you. You don't have half connections keeping you entertained. And that quiet can feel heavy, because for a long time, chaos made you feel needed, inconsistency made you feel chosen, fixing things made you feel valuable, Now none of that is there, and your brain tries to convince you that you're missing out, that maybe you were happier when you stayed, that maybe standards are overrated, that maybe being lonely is worse than being disrespected. But that's just the adjustment period. You're unlearning a pattern where love had to hurt to feel real. Self-respect strips away the noise and leaves you with truth. You start seeing how many connections were built on convenience instead of care. How many people stayed because you made it easy for them, not because they valued you. And yes, that realization stings, but it also gives you something you didn't have before: peace, no guessing, no waiting, no emotional whiplash, just clarity. And from that clarity, your standards get quieter but stronger. You don't announce them, you don't defend them, you just live by them. And anyone who can't meet you there falls away naturally. Loneliness isn't punishment here. It's space to rebuild your sense of worth without someone else validating it, space to remember who you are when you're not chasing or fixing or proving. And soon, that loneliness turns into confidence. Not loud confidence, stable confidence. The kind that doesn't rush, the kind that doesn't beg, the kind that knows red flags aren't obstacles, they're directions. At some point, you realize something uncomfortable. You don't actually miss them. You miss the version of yourself that kept trying to be enough. You miss the effort you gave, the hope you held on to, the belief that if you just loved harder, things would finally change, because chasing gave you purpose. It made your pain feel meaningful. It made waiting feel justified. It made disappointment feel like part of the process. Now that you've stopped, there's nothing left to fix. And that's when the grief shows up. You grieve the time you spent trying to earn what should have been given freely. You grieve the energy you poured into people who never poured back. You grieve the patience you mistook for love, not because you were foolish, but because you cared. And it hurts to admit that caring didn't save anything. You start seeing clearly how often you ignored your own voice, how many times your body told you to leave while your heart begged you to stay. You stayed loyal to people who weren't loyal to your peace, and that realization is heavy, because now you can't go back, you can't unsee the patterns, you can't pretend disrespect was accidental. You can't convince yourself that red flags were just misunderstandings. You've outgrown the version of you that survived on hope alone, and while that growth is necessary, it still feels like loss. But here's the truth: you didn't lose something real. You let go of something that only existed because you kept tolerating it. And the more distance you get, the clearer it becomes. What you were missing wasn't love, it was self-respect. Ignoring red flags was never about love. It was about not wanting to choose yourself, because choosing yourself meant walking away without guarantees, without reassurance, without someone else filling the silence. So you stayed. You told yourself love takes patience, that people need time, that your pain was just part of the process. But deep down, you knew the truth. You weren't staying because it felt right. You were staying because leaving felt terrifying. Terrifying to be alone. Terrifying to admit you deserved better. Terrifying to sit with the idea that you chose someone who couldn't choose you back, though you ignored the signs. Not because you didn't see them, but because seeing them meant action. And action meant accountability. But here's what finally clicks. Red flags don't hurt you. Ignoring them does. Every time you stayed, you taught yourself that your needs were optional. Every time you excused behavior, you taught yourself that love should be endured. Every time you waited for change, you delayed your own growth. And that cycle doesn't end when someone finally treats you right. It ends when you stop accepting what treats you wrong. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop wanting love. It means you stop betraying yourself just to keep it. It means you walk away sooner. You trust discomfort. You listen the first time something feels off. Not because you're cold, but because you're done confusing pain with connection. And once you reach this point, red flags don't feel complicated anymore. They feel clear. You don't argue with them. You don't negotiate with them. You don't try to turn them green. You leave because now you understand something you didn't before. Being alone is temporary, self-betrayal is cumulative, and you're no longer willing to pay that price. That's not bitterness, that's self-respect, and that's where the cycle finally ends. I'm romantic. I believe in effort, in choosing someone daily, in love that feels intentional, not accidental, but I'm not naive anymore. I don't confuse chemistry with commitment. I don't mistake words for consistency. I don't fall in love with potential and ignore reality to protect the fantasy. That version of me is gone. Being romantic doesn't mean I overlook red flags. It doesn't mean I excuse disrespect. It doesn't mean I stay just because I feel deeply. It means I love with awareness now. I still want connection, still want intimacy, still want something real, but I'm no longer willing to sacrifice my peace just to keep a feeling alive. I know the difference now between someone who feels good and someone who is good for me. I know the difference between affection and effort, between attention and intention, and I don't chase illusions anymore. I won't romanticize someone who can't show up consistently. I won't soften the truth to protect a story I wanted to believe in. I can be tender and still have boundaries, hopeful and still realistic. Romantic doesn't mean blind. It means I care deeply, but I pay attention. And this time I don't fall in love at the expense of myself. I used to think being romantic meant enduring, staying longer than I should, giving the benefit of the doubt even when doubt was all I felt, believing that love meant patience no matter the cost. That's where it went wrong. I mistook tolerance for depth. I confused hope with commitment. I kept softening my boundaries to protect a version of love that wasn't protecting me. That wasn't romance, that was self-abandonment. Being romantic doesn't mean I ignore patterns. It doesn't mean I wait for someone to become who they promise to be. It means I listen when actions contradict words. It means I leave when effort fades. It means I don't negotiate respect just to keep a connection alive. I still believe in love that's big, in feelings that are deep, in choosing someone with intention. But now, romance has standards. I won't pour into uncertainty. I won't romanticize inconsistency. I won't stay where I feel anxious and call it passion. Romantic love should feel safe enough to be honest, stable enough to be real, mutual enough to last, and if it isn't, I don't try to fix it anymore. Because I can be romantic without being reckless with my heart. Being romantic but not naive changes how you choose people from the very beginning. You don't rush connection anymore. You don't get swept up by intensity. You don't confuse attention with alignment. You let things unfold. You watch how someone shows up when it's inconvenient, how they communicate when things are unclear, how they act when they don't get their way. Because attraction is easy, consistency is not. You stop falling for the idea of someone and start paying attention to how they actually treat you. Do they follow through? Do they respect your time? Do they show curiosity about your inner world? Or just enjoy how you make them feel? Being romantic doesn't mean you stop feeling sparks. It means sparks aren't enough anymore. You want safety with the spark, effort with the chemistry, clarity with the feelings, so you slow down, not because you're scared, but because you value yourself too much to rush into something unproven. You let people reveal who they are without trying to fill in the gaps for them. And if something feels off, you don't romanticize it. You listen, because the right connection won't need you to ignore yourself to keep it alive. Being romantic without being naive means I still believe in love. I just don't chase it blindly anymore. I don't force connections. I don't convince people to choose me. I don't stay where effort feels one-sided and call it patience. I let love meet me where I am. If someone wants me, I won't have to guess. If someone cares, I won't have to ask repeatedly. If something is real, it won't require me to ignore my instincts. I still believe in late-night talks, in choosing each other, in building something meaningful, but I don't sacrifice clarity for intensity anymore. I've learned that love isn't proven by how much you're willing to endure. It's proven by how safe you feel being yourself without shrinking, performing, or waiting. So now I don't rush toward feelings just because they're strong. I let actions catch up to words. I let time reveal truth. I let consistency do the convincing. And if someone can't meet me there, I don't make it mean love is dead. I just understand that not every connection is meant to last. I can still be soft, still hopeful, still romantic. I'm just no longer willing to lose myself for the sake of a feeling. Being romantic, not naive, changed what I tolerate. I don't excuse inconsistency anymore. I don't sit with confusion and call it giving things time. I don't ignore the feeling that something is off just because I want it to work. Before, I'd stay and explain. I'd adjust. I'd wait. Now, I observe. If effort fades, I notice. If respect slips, I address it once. If nothing changes, I leave. Not angrily, not dramatically, just clearly. I don't feel guilty walking away from things that don't align anymore, because walking away isn't punishment, it's protection. I used to think romance meant holding on. Now I know it also means knowing when to let go. I still care deeply, still feel intensely, still believe in choosing someone with intention, but I won't romanticize potential at the expense of reality. I won't stay where I feel anxious, unseen, or unsure of my place. Romance without boundaries is just hope with no direction. And now, my heart has standards, not walls, standards. Being romantic and grounded makes love feel quieter than I expected. There's no chaos, no guessing games, no emotional roller coaster disguised as passion. And at first that felt strange. I was used to intensity proving something, used to anxiety meaning I cared, used to confusion keeping me invested. But that wasn't depth, that was instability. Now, romance feels calm. It looks like consistency. It sounds like clear communication. It feels like not having to overthink where I stand. There's still excitement. It's just not fueled by uncertainty. I don't need constant reassurance anymore. I don't need dramatic gestures to feel chosen. I don't need to be chased to feel wanted. Because when something is real, it doesn't keep you on edge. Being romantic doesn't mean I crave fireworks every moment. It means I value safety with the spark, peace with the passion, connection that doesn't cost me my balance. And the biggest shift, I don't mistake calm for boredom anymore. I understand now that love doesn't have to be loud to be meaningful. Sometimes the most romantic thing is feeling secure enough to just be yourself. Being romantic, not naive, changed how I communicate my needs. I don't hint anymore. I don't water things down to avoid being too much. I don't stay silent hoping someone will just figure it out. I say what I need, not aggressively, not defensively, just honestly, because needing clarity isn't pressure. Needing consistency isn't insecurity. Needing effort isn't asking for the world, it's asking for alignment. Before, I was scared that speaking up would push people away, that if I asked for more, I'd lose what I had. Now I understand something important. If honesty scares someone off, they were never meant to stay. I don't over-explain myself anymore. I don't apologize for having standards. I don't negotiate my needs to make someone comfortable. Romance doesn't mean silence. It means trusting that the right person won't feel threatened by clear communication. They won't call it drama. They won't call it too much. They won't make you feel guilty for wanting to feel secure. They'll listen, they'll respond, they'll meet you where you are. And if they don't, I don't take it personally, because being romantic, not naive, means I'd rather be understood slowly than misunderstood forever. Being romantic with boundaries filters people out quietly. You don't have to test anyone, you don't have to interrogate intentions, you don't have to force clarity. You just stay consistent with who you are, you show up honestly, you communicate clearly. You don't overgive to keep someone interested, and that alone does the work. People who only wanted attention get bored. People who thrived on ambiguity get uncomfortable. People who wanted access without effort slowly fade, and you let them, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped chasing. Being romantic, not naive, means you don't audition for love anymore. You don't prove your worth. You don't compete for consistency. You don't bend yourself to be easier to choose. You let people meet you where you stand, and the ones who can't, they remove themselves. That used to scare you. Now it reassures you, because the right connection won't need you to lower your standards to keep it alive. It will rise to meet them. And the most romantic thing about that, you don't have to lose yourself to find love anymore. I still believe in love. That part never left. What changed is who I trust first. I believe in myself now. I trust my intuition when something feels off. I trust my boundaries when they need to be held. I trust my heart without handing it over blindly. Before, I believed love required risk at any cost, that you had to jump first and hope someone caught you. Now I know better. Real love doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. It doesn't punish you for being honest. It doesn't require you to doubt your worth to keep it alive. Being romantic, not naive, means I still dream. I just don't disappear into the dream. I don't ignore red flags to protect the fantasy. I don't silence my needs to keep someone comfortable. I don't romanticize suffering and call it devotion. I let love add to my life, not destabilize it. And the biggest shift of all, I don't fear losing love anymore the way I used to, because I know I won't lose myself trying to keep it. That confidence didn't come from love finding me. It came from me finally standing with myself. Being romantic, not naive, means I didn't lose my softness. I refined it. I still believe in love that's intentional, in effort that's mutual, in choosing someone without hesitation or games. But I no longer confuse love with endurance. I won't stay where I feel uncertain. I won't fight for clarity. I won't romanticize someone's potential while ignoring how they treat me now. Romance isn't blind faith anymore. It's awareness. It's knowing that feelings matter, but actions matter more. That chemistry is exciting, but consistency is what lasts. That love shouldn't cost you your peace, your voice, or yourself. I still want something real. I still want depth. I still want connection that feels meaningful. I just won't abandon myself to get it. If someone meets me with honesty, I open my heart. If they meet me with effort, I lean in. If they meet me halfway, I walk the rest with them. And if they don't, I don't force it. I don't chase it. I don't grieve what was never aligned. Because being romantic doesn't mean I accept less. It means I know exactly what kind of love I want. And I'm patient enough to wait for something that doesn't ask me to be smaller, quieter, or less aware. I'm still a romantic. I just finally learned how to protect my heart without closing it. And that's the difference. She made me feel loved, not in a loud way, not in a dramatic way, in a steady way. She checked in, she listened, she remembered the small things, and the crazy part, I didn't know what to do with it. Because when you're used to chaos, consistency feels unfamiliar. When you're used to chasing, being chosen feels suspicious. She wasn't confusing, she wasn't distant, she wasn't playing games, she was just there. And for some reason, that scared me more than anything. Healthy love feels calm, and when you're used to chaos, calm can feel boring. There were no mixed signals, no guessing games, no hot and cold energy. She didn't make me question where I stood, and that was new. I was used to intensity, late-night arguments, emotional highs and lows, passion that felt like a roller coaster. With her, it was steady, and instead of relaxing into it, I started looking for something wrong. Because when you've been conditioned to associate love with anxiety, peace feels unfamiliar. You mistake stability for a lack of spark, consistency for predictability, security for missing something. But the truth, nothing was missing. I just didn't know how to receive love that didn't hurt first. Sometimes we don't sabotage love because we don't care. We sabotage it because we don't feel worthy of it. She showed up consistently, she communicated clearly, she didn't make me chase, and instead of feeling grateful, I felt exposed, because when someone loves you properly, they see you, not just the confident version, not just the charming version. The insecure parts too, the guarded parts, the parts that still haven't healed. And when you don't fully love yourself, being loved deeply feels uncomfortable. You start thinking, what if she realizes I'm not as solid as I seem? What if she expects more than I can give? What if I mess this up? So you create distance first, you act unsure, you slow down, you convince yourself the timing isn't right. not because she wasn't enough, but because you didn't feel like you were. I told myself it wasn't the right time, that I needed to focus on myself, that I wasn't in the right headspace, that something felt off, but if I'm being honest, nothing was off. I was just scared of being responsible for something real. Scared of being consistent, scared of not being able to hide behind confusion anymore. Because when someone loves you right, there's no chaos to blame, no mixed signals to point at, no drama to distract you. It's just clarity. And clarity means accountability. I couldn't say she didn't show up. She did. I couldn't say she wasn't serious. She was. So the only thing left to question was myself. And that's harder than walking away. You don't always realize what you had while you have it. Sometimes you realize it in the silence after, when the good morning texts stop, when the consistency disappears, when the calm you once questioned is suddenly gone. And that's when it hits. She wasn't boring, she was safe, she wasn't too available, she was intentional. She wasn't lacking spark, she just wasn't chaos. I confused stability with something missing because I was addicted to intensity. And now that it's quiet, I see it clearly. She wasn't asking for too much. She was offering exactly what I claimed I wanted, and the hardest part is realizing she didn't leave because she didn't care. She left because I hesitated. Growth doesn't always happen while you're in something good. Sometimes it happens after you lose it, after the silence, after the distance, after you sit alone with no one to blame but yourself. That's when reflection hits differently. You replay conversations, moments you brushed off, times she asked for reassurance and you gave her half answers, not because you didn't care, but because you weren't mature enough yet to handle something healthy. And the painful part, you finally become the version of yourself that she needed, clearer, more emotionally aware, more ready, but she's not there anymore. And that's the lesson. Sometimes the right person meets you at the wrong version of yourself, and losing them is what forces you to grow. Now the question is different. Do I reach back out, or do I let her have the peace I couldn't give her before because missing someone isn't the same as being ready for them? Regret can feel like growth, loneliness can feel like clarity, but are you actually different, or do you just miss how she made you feel? That's the part nobody talks about. It's easy to want someone back when you finally understand their value. It's harder to admit you might still not be the version they deserve. Reaching out isn't about easing your guilt. It's about being certain you won't repeat the same pattern. Because if she loved you right once, she deserves someone who can love her right back. And if that's finally you, then show up differently. If it's not, let her be loved properly by someone who was ready the first time. Being ready isn't about having your life perfect. It's about emotional responsibility. It's about being able to communicate without shutting down, being consistent without feeling trapped, being vulnerable without running when it gets real. I thought being ready meant having money right, career right, timing right, but she didn't need perfection. She needed presence. She needed reassurance without having to beg for it. She needed clarity without having to decode it. She needed someone who didn't confuse peace with boredom. And the truth, I wasn't emotionally disciplined enough. I liked being loved, but I wasn't ready to love back at the same level. And that's the difference. Being ready means you don't just enjoy the love, you reciprocate it fully. Was losing her a mistake, or was it a lesson I had to learn the hard way? At first it felt like a mistake, like I let something rare slip through my hands, like I fumbled the one person who actually showed up right. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized something. If I wasn't ready, I would have hurt her eventually. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but through inconsistency, through hesitation, through emotional immaturity. And she didn't deserve that. Sometimes the loss isn't punishment, it's preparation. Preparation to become the version of yourself who doesn't run from healthy love, who doesn't confuse peace with boredom, who doesn't sabotage stability. Maybe she wasn't meant to stay forever. Maybe she was meant to show me what real love looks like, so I'd stop settling for less and stop being less. And that doesn't erase the regret, but it gives it meaning. Will she ever know how much she meant to me? Probably not in the way she deserved, because when she was loving me out loud, I was loving her quietly. When she was certain, I was unsure. When she was present, I was half in. And now that I finally understand her value, it's in hindsight. But here's what I do know. She raised my standard, not just for what I want, but for who I need to be. She showed me that love doesn't have to be chaotic to be real, that consistency isn't boring, that reassurance isn't weakness, that stability is rare, and maybe she'll never know how much she changed me. Maybe she'll never know that losing her is what forced me to grow. But one day, when I love someone the right way, fully, clearly, consistently, a part of that will be because of her, because she loved me right, even when I wasn't ready, and that's something I'll always respect. I don't think love works anymore. Not the way it used to. Not the way we were told it would, because everything about it feels fragile now, disposable, temporary. I used to believe love was something you built and protected, something you chose every day, something that got stronger the more you worked through it. Now it feels like something people try on, like an outfit, like a phase, like something that lasts until it becomes inconvenient. And maybe that's just my experience talking. Maybe I'm jaded, maybe I'm tired, but it's hard not to feel this way when you've watched effort get ignored, loyalty get tested, and consistency get replaced with excitement. It feels like the people who care the most lose the fastest. The ones who communicate openly get labeled too much. The ones who stay calm get called boring. The ones who try to build something stable get overlooked for something unpredictable. And I don't understand when stability became unattractive. When did peace start feeling dull? When did consistency start feeling optional? When did love turn into a competition of who cares less? Because that's what it feels like now. Who replies slower? Who shows less emotion? Who keeps more options open? Who can detach quicker? It feels like the winner in modern love is the one who invests the least, and that doesn't make sense to me, because love was never supposed to be strategic. It was supposed to be mutual. It was supposed to feel safe. It was supposed to feel intentional. But now, it feels like leverage. It feels like power dynamics. It feels like emotional poker, and I'm tired of pretending that doesn't affect me. I don't want to play games. I don't want to pretend I don't care just to protect myself. I don't want to withhold affection just to maintain mystery. But every time I show up genuinely, it feels like I lose. And after enough losses, you start questioning the system, not yourself, the system. Because if doing things the right way keeps ending the wrong way, you start wondering if the rules changed, and maybe they did. Social media makes everyone feel replaceable. Dating apps make options endless. Attention is constant. Validation is everywhere, so commitment feels outdated. Why work through something uncomfortable when you can scroll into something new? Why communicate through confusion when you can ghost and reset? Why fix when you can replace? And I hate that mindset, but I see it everywhere. And after a while, it makes you wonder if love is even designed to last in this environment. If loyalty is rare, if depth is rare, if patience is rare. And when something is rare, it's harder to find. And when it's harder to find, you start feeling like maybe it doesn't work anymore. Not because love isn't real, but because people aren't built to sustain it. And that's the scariest thought, because I don't want to become cold. I don't want to stop believing, but I'm tired of investing in something that feels unstable. I'm tired of building just to watch it collapse. I'm tired of thinking something is solid just to realize it was temporary. And maybe love still works. Maybe it's just harder to find. Maybe it requires more maturity than most people are willing to bring. But right now, it feels broken. Not love itself, but the way we handle it. And I don't know if that's pessimism talking or experience. I think what makes me say, I don't think love works anymore isn't bitterness, it's exhaustion. Because every time I try to approach it the right way, intentional, honest, consistent, it feels like I'm bringing depth into a space that rewards detachment. And And after a while, you start feeling like you're built wrong for this era. Like maybe you care too much. Like maybe you expect too much. Like maybe you still believe in something that everyone else quietly downgraded. It feels like effort used to mean something. Now effort feels risky because the more you give, the more exposed you are. And exposure in modern dating feels dangerous. The one who opens up first is vulnerable. The one who commits first is replaceable. The one who expresses feelings first is too invested. So people hold back, they ration affection, they ration honesty, they ration effort, and when both people are rationing, nothing fully forms. It becomes this half-built connection where nobody is fully in, just partially attached and partially guarded. And that's where love starts to feel like it doesn't work, because love requires surrender, not recklessness. Not obsession, but surrender. You have to be willing to be seen, willing to risk loss, willing to invest without guaranteed return. And nobody wants to do that anymore. Everyone wants certainty before commitment, proof before vulnerability, security before effort. But that's not how love works. Love is built in uncertainty. It's built in risk. It's built in choosing someone without knowing the full outcome. And we live in a time where uncertainty feels intolerable. We want options. We want backups. We want insurance. So instead of building depth with one person, we keep one foot out the door just in case. And you can't build something real with one foot already outside. That's why it feels broken. Not because love itself stopped working, but because we approach it defensively now. And I get it. People have been hurt. People have been betrayed. People have been replaced, so they protect themselves. But protection can slowly turn into detachment, and detachment kills depth. You can't love deeply if you're constantly calculating exits. You can't bond securely if you're scanning for upgrades. You can't build trust if you're always half preparing for collapse. And I'm tired of feeling like I have to adapt to that. I don't want to love strategically. I don't want to care less just to stay safe. I don't want to pretend I don't feel strongly just to avoid looking invested. But when you keep getting hurt for showing up fully, you start wondering if maybe the world rewards the opposite. And that's where the doubt creeps in. Maybe love doesn't work anymore because too many people are operating from fear instead of intention. Too many people want the feeling of love without the responsibility of it. They want butterflies but not boundaries, excitement but not effort, chemistry but not consistency, and chemistry fades without consistency. Excitement fades without stability. Butterflies disappear when there's no structure holding them, so relationships collapse, and instead of reflecting, people reset, and the cycle continues. And when you've seen that cycle enough times, it's hard not to feel like something fundamental shifted. Like the culture around love changed. Like commitment feels heavier now. Like loyalty feels optional. Like patience feels outdated. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are still people who believe in depth. Maybe there are still people who value stability. Maybe there are still people who don't treat connection like it's disposable. But when your personal experiences keep showing the opposite, it's hard to stay optimistic. It's hard to believe love works when everything around it feels temporary. And I don't want to lose faith, but I also don't want to keep pretending it's easy, because it's not anymore. And maybe love still works, but maybe it only works when two people are equally ready to stop playing defense, and that combination feels rare, not impossible, just rare. And rare takes patience, and patience feels hard when you've already invested so much of it before. So yeah, right now it feels broken. But maybe what's broken isn't love. Maybe it's how we've learned to approach it, and that might be fixable, but only if both people are willing to actually build instead of constantly preparing to leave. Maybe the real reason I don't think love works anymore is because it feels like timing is always off. You meet someone who seems aligned, you connect, you talk for hours, you feel understood, and then something small shifts. Not dramatic, not explosive, just subtle. They pull back slightly, energy changes, consistency drops, and instead of addressing it directly, things fade. That's what modern love feels like. Not endings, fading, no real closure, no real confrontation, just gradual detachment, and it leaves you questioning everything. Did I imagine the connection? Did I misread the depth? Did they ever feel it the way I did? Because when something ends without clarity, your mind fills in the blanks, and most of the time the blanks aren't kind. You start blaming yourself. Maybe I was too much, maybe I wasn't enough, maybe I moved too fast, maybe I didn't move fast enough, and that mental spiral gets exhausting. Love starts feeling like a puzzle with missing pieces. Like no matter how carefully you approach it, something unpredictable shifts. And maybe that unpredictability is what makes it feel broken, because love requires stability to grow. You can't build something meaningful on inconsistent ground. You can't plant something deep in unstable soil. And right now, everything feels unstable. People are distracted. Attention spans are shorter. Validation is constant. It's hard to compete with instant dopamine, because love isn't instant dopamine. It's slow burn. It's repetition. It's routine. It's choosing someone again and again, even when the excitement settles. And we live in a culture that constantly chases the next high. So once comfort replaces adrenaline, people confuse it with boredom. Once peace replaces intensity, people think something's missing. But peace isn't missing something. Peace is the goal. And maybe that's why love feels like it doesn't work anymore. Because people are chasing sparks instead of substance. They want fireworks every day, but fireworks aren't sustainable. They're loud, they're bright, they're temporary. Real love isn't fireworks, it's foundation, and foundations aren't flashy. They're steady, and steady doesn't trend well. Steady doesn't go viral. Steady doesn't give you constant emotional spikes, but steady is what lasts. And maybe we forgot that. Maybe we've confused intensity with compatibility. Maybe we've confused excitement with alignment. Maybe we've confused attention with affection. And when those illusions fade, people assume love failed. But maybe love didn't fail. Maybe expectations did. Still, it's hard not to feel tired, because every time you start believing in something new, you're also bracing for impact. You don't enter connections open anymore. You enter them cautiously, guarded, prepared, and that guarded energy changes everything, because love thrives in openness, and guarded hearts can't fully attach. So it becomes this cycle. People get hurt, they protect themselves, they enter something new with walls up. The connection never fully forms, it collapses. They say, see, love doesn't work. But maybe the walls are the problem. Maybe we're all trying to avoid pain so aggressively that we're also avoiding depth. And I don't know how to fix that, because I understand why people guard themselves. I do it too. After enough disappointment, you start building armor, but armor blocks connection just as much as it blocks harm. And that's the dilemma. How do you stay open in a world that keeps showing you how easy it is to be replaced? How do you trust when you've seen how quickly people move on? How do you believe in permanence when everything feels temporary? Those questions don't have easy answers. And that's why sometimes it feels easier to just say, love doesn't work anymore. Because admitting it feels broken, feels safer than admitting you're still hoping it does. And maybe that's the truth. Maybe I don't actually think love is broken. Maybe I'm just scared that I won't find someone who approaches it the way I do. Someone who values depth over dopamine, stability over sparks, consistency over chaos. Because if that kind of person still exists, then maybe love still works. It's just rare. And rare feels invisible when you've only experienced the opposite. So maybe love isn't broken. Maybe the way we approach it is. And maybe the real challenge isn't finding love. It's finding someone who isn't playing defense the whole time, because love can't work if both people are preparing for it to fail. It only works when both decide to build, not brace, and that's what I'm still trying to believe. I think what really makes me say love doesn't work anymore is how disposable everything feels. Nothing feels permanent. Not feelings, not promises, not even history. You can spend months building something with someone. Routines, memories, habits, inside jokes, and then one day it's like it never happened. They move on, they reset, they rebrand their life without you in it, and you're left sitting there wondering how something that felt so real could be treated so lightly. It makes you question whether permanence even exists anymore. Because love used to mean endurance. It used to mean working through discomfort. It used to mean fighting for connection when things got complicated. Now it feels like the moment things feel heavy, people exit. The moment conflict shows up, people reconsider. The moment effort is required consistently, people get tired, and I'm not saying everyone is like that, but it's common enough that it starts to feel normal, and when something unhealthy becomes normalized, you start adjusting your expectations, you start lowering standards without even realizing it. You start telling yourself, maybe this is just how it is now, maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe stability is unrealistic, and that's the dangerous part, because once you start believing depth is unrealistic, you start accepting less than you deserve. You start settling for half effort, half commitment, half presence, and half love never feels secure. It feels temporary. It feels like you're constantly on probation. Like you have to maintain value instead of simply being valued, and that's exhausting. Love shouldn't feel like an audition. It shouldn't feel like you're being evaluated weekly. It shouldn't feel like you're one mistake away from being replaced, but that's what modern dating culture does. It keeps everyone slightly disposable because there's always another option, and options change the psychology of commitment. Now, when people feel like there's endless supply, they don't invest deeply. They sample, they test, they compare, they upgrade. And depth requires focus. You can't build something meaningful if you're constantly scanning the horizon. And I'm tired of feeling like depth is rare, like loyalty is rare, like emotional maturity is rare. Because if those things are rare, then sustainable love becomes rare too. And when something becomes rare, it starts feeling mythical, like a concept instead of a reality. And I don't want love to feel mythical. I want it to feel grounded, attainable, real. But it's hard to believe in that when everything around you looks temporary. It's hard to stay optimistic when you've watched people replace long-term connections in weeks, when you've seen loyalty get overlooked for excitement, when you've seen communication get labeled as too intense. It makes you question if the qualities you value are even appreciated anymore. And I refuse to become colder just to survive in this environment, but sometimes I understand why people do. Because caring fully feels risky, showing up fully feels vulnerable, and vulnerability feels unsafe when you've seen how quickly people pivot. So instead of opening fully, people guard. Instead of committing deeply, people hesitate. Instead of building, people browse. And browsing never creates attachment, it creates distraction. So maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore, because too many people are browsing instead of building. Too many people are entertaining instead of committing. Too many people are protecting themselves instead of participating fully. And when both people are slightly guarded, slightly detached, slightly prepared to leave, the connection never roots deeply, it stays surface level. And surface level love doesn't survive pressure. It collapses the moment something real tests it, and that collapse reinforces the belief. See, love doesn't work, but maybe love isn't failing, maybe it's just not being handled properly, maybe it requires two people who are equally tired of games, equally tired of ego, equally ready to stop scanning and start building, and that combination is rare, not impossible, just rare. And when something is rare, it takes time to find. But when you've already waited, already invested, already tried, it's hard not to feel discouraged. It's hard not to say, maybe this just doesn't work anymore. Because hope feels heavy when you've carried it through disappointment repeatedly. Still, there's a small part of me that refuses to fully give up, not because I haven't been hurt, but because I know what depth feels like, and I know I'm capable of giving it. So maybe love doesn't feel broken, maybe it just feels misaligned. Maybe I haven't met someone operating at the same level yet, and maybe love only doesn't work when one person is building and the other is browsing. And next time I won't settle for someone who's just browsing, because I'm done treating love like something experimental. I want something intentional, and if that's rare, then I'll wait, but I won't pretend that what's common right now feels functional, because it doesn't, and that's why sometimes it feels broken. Another reason I feel like love doesn't work anymore is because nobody seems patient enough for it. Real love is repetitive. It's waking up and choosing the same person on regular days, not just exciting ones. It's having conversations that aren't aesthetic. It's working through misunderstandings. It's sitting in awkward silence sometimes. It's resolving conflict instead of avoiding it. And patience feels rare now. The moment something feels complicated, people start questioning compatibility instead of questioning their communication. The moment effort feels required, people start asking if there's someone easier. The moment discomfort shows up, people confuse it with wrong person. But discomfort isn't always misalignment. Sometimes it's growth. Sometimes it's two different perspectives trying to learn each other. And learning takes time, but time feels expensive in a world where attention is cheap. It's easier to restart with someone new than it is to repair with someone familiar. It's easier to chase a fresh high than maintain steady connection. It's easier to scroll than sit, and when everything around you reinforces immediacy, patience feels outdated. But love has never been immediate. It starts fast sometimes, and sure, but it sustains slowly, and sustainability isn't exciting. It's disciplined, it's structured, it's built, and I think a lot of people want the feeling of falling in love, but not the responsibility of staying in love. Falling is automatic, staying is intentional, falling feels magical, staying feels deliberate, and deliberate takes effort, and effort feels optional now. That's what makes it feel broken. Because if two people aren't equally patient, equally committed to working through friction, the relationship never stabilizes. It stays fragile, and fragile things shatter easily. Then everyone says, see, it didn't work, but maybe it didn't work because it was never given time to become strong. You can't plant something and expect it to grow overnight, but people expect emotional security immediately. They expect certainty quickly. They expect perfection early, and when reality shows flaws, they exit instead of adjusting. And after experiencing that enough times, you start questioning whether anyone actually stays long enough to build something durable. It's exhausting to be the only one willing to sit in discomfort and talk it through. It's exhausting to be the only one committed to fixing instead of fleeing. It's exhausting to feel like you're building while the other person is evaluating, and evaluation kills intimacy, because if someone is constantly assessing whether you're worth it, they're never fully in. They're half invested, half prepared to leave. And love doesn't grow in half investment, it grows in commitment. So maybe love doesn't feel broken, maybe commitment does, maybe patience does, maybe resilience does, because real love requires all three, and without them it collapses under the weight of normal human imperfection, and humans are imperfect, always, which means love will always require forgiveness, always require communication, always require choosing someone even when it's not convenient, and if people aren't willing to do that consistently, then yeah, it starts to feel like love doesn't work anymore because nobody is sustaining it long enough to see it mature. And maturity is where love actually becomes powerful, not in the butterflies, not in the early intensity, but in the stability that comes after. And maybe we're just living in a time that glorifies the beginning but undervalues the maintenance, and maintenance isn't sexy, but it's essential. And I'm not ready to say love is dead, but I am ready to admit that patience feels endangered, and without patience, nothing lasting survives. Maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore because nobody trusts it. Not fully, not without hesitation. Everyone says they want something real, but when something real starts forming, fear shows up faster than commitment. Fear of being replaced, fear of being cheated on, fear of being the one who cares more, fear of looking stupid. So instead of leaning in, people brace. They stay slightly detached. They keep backup options emotionally. They don't say everything they feel. They don't invest fully. And when two people are both protecting themselves at the same time, nothing deep ever roots. It becomes this cautious connection where both are waiting for the other to prove something first. Show me you won't leave. Show me you're serious. Show me I'm safe. But safety doesn't come from interrogation. It comes from participation. And participation requires risk. That's the part that feels lost now. Nobody wants to risk looking foolish for love, but love has always required that. You have to be willing to look foolish, to say I care first, to show up consistently even when you don't know the outcome, to invest without a guarantee, and guarantees don't exist. So instead of risking vulnerability, people risk nothing. They test, they observe, they calculate, they delay emotional investment until it feels secure. But emotional security doesn't grow from calculation. It grows from consistency, and consistency requires trust, and trust requires vulnerability. It's a cycle, and when one part is missing, the whole structure collapses. So maybe love feels broken because too many people are trying to feel safe before they've actually built anything safe. They want certainty before commitment, but certainty is something you earn together, not something you demand up front. And I get it. Nobody wants to be hurt again. Nobody wants to feel like the fool who cared more. Nobody wants to invest months just to be replaced in weeks. But if both people are guarding themselves at all times, love never gets a chance to breathe. It suffocates under suspicion, it weakens under ego, it dissolves under comparison, and comparison is everywhere now. We compare partners to people online, we compare relationships to curated timelines, we compare our connection to someone else's highlight reel, and comparison erodes gratitude. It makes you focus on what's missing instead of what's present, and when gratitude fades, dissatisfaction grows, and dissatisfaction looks for alternatives, and alternatives are always available now, so commitment feels heavier than ever, because staying means choosing one thing in a world full of options, and that feels scary to people who haven't learned how to be content. And that's another part of why it feels like love doesn't work, because contentment is rare, and without contentment nothing feels enough. Not the effort, not the loyalty, not the stability. There's always a what if, and what if is poison to commitment. What if there's someone better? What if I'm settling? What if this isn't the highest version of love? But love isn't about maximizing, it's about choosing. And choice requires focus, and focus requires discipline. And discipline isn't romanticized anymore. Excitement is, intensity is, instant chemistry is. But chemistry alone can't sustain anything. It ignites, it doesn't stabilize, and maybe that's why love feels like it fails. Because people confuse ignition with foundation. They fall fast, they burn bright, they collapse quickly. And then they say, see? Love doesn't work. But maybe what didn't work was patience. Maybe what didn't work was emotional maturity. Maybe what didn't work was two people being equally willing to commit without constantly scanning for something better. I don't think love stopped working. I think standards changed. I think attention got divided. I think ego got louder. And I think fear got stronger. And fear makes people protect themselves in ways that sabotage the very thing they want. So when I say I don't think love works anymore, maybe what I really mean is I don't see enough people willing to handle it properly, because love is simple. People complicate it. Love is consistent. People are inconsistent. Love is intentional. People are distracted. And until two people show up ready to be disciplined about connection, not just excited about it, it's going to keep feeling unstable. And that's exhausting, because I don't want to approach love like a risk assessment. I want to approach it like a build. But building requires two architects, not one builder and one evaluator. And maybe that's the real challenge, not finding love, but finding someone who isn't quietly preparing for it to fail. Because love only doesn't work when someone stops working at it. And too many people stop the moment it requires effort instead of adrenaline. And I'm tired of adrenaline. I want foundation. And until I find someone who wants foundation too, it's gonna feel broken. Another reason it feels like love doesn't work anymore is because people are addicted to potential more than presence. They fall in love with what something could be instead of what it actually is. They fall for the idea, the fantasy, the imagined future. But when reality sets in, flaws, habits, differences, instead of adjusting expectations, they downgrade the connection. It's like people want perfection in a human body, and humans aren't perfect. So the moment imperfection shows up, doubt follows. She could be better. He could be more. This might not be the best I can get. And that mindset destroys contentment. Because if you're always wondering if something better exists, you'll never water what's in front of you. You'll keep browsing instead of building. And browsing doesn't create depth. It creates comparison. And comparison slowly poisons appreciation. You stop seeing what someone does for you. You focus on what they don't. You stop valuing consistency. You crave excitement, and excitement is unstable. Love isn't built on constant excitement. It's built on reliability, and reliability feels boring if you're addicted to adrenaline. That's the uncomfortable truth. Some people don't want peace. They want chaos that feels passionate. They want intensity that feels cinematic. They want love to look like a movie, dramatic, emotional, unpredictable, but real love is structured, it's routine, it's sometimes quiet, and quiet doesn't trend, quiet doesn't feel thrilling, but quiet is secure. And security is rare in a world that rewards unpredictability. So when someone gives you stability, it feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels uncomfortable, and uncomfortable gets labeled as not right, so they leave, and then they chase something that feels intense again, and that cycle repeats, and every time it collapses, they say, love just doesn't work for me. But maybe it's not love that's failing, maybe it's expectations, maybe it's the craving for perfection, maybe it's the refusal to accept that long-term connection requires compromise and discipline, because compromise doesn't mean settling, it means adjusting, it means understanding that no person will check every box, it means valuing depth over dopamine. And dopamine fades, depth stays, but depth requires maturity. And maturity isn't loud, it's subtle, it's calm, it's secure enough to not constantly question whether something better exists, and that kind of security feels rare right now. It feels like people want love to feel good every second, but no connection feels good every second. There are misunderstandings, bad days, moments of frustration, and if someone expects constant emotional highs, they'll leave the moment it feels neutral. And neutral isn't bad. Neutral is stable, but stability doesn't give you butterflies, it gives you peace, and peace feels unfamiliar in a culture addicted to stimulation. So sometimes it feels like love doesn't work anymore because people don't recognize it. When it's calm, they mistake chaos for chemistry. They mistake unpredictability for passion, they mistake anxiety for attraction, and healthy love doesn't feel anxious, it feels steady. But if someone's nervous system is used to chaos, steady feels boring, and boring feels wrong, so they leave something stable for something intense. And intensity fades, and the cycle repeats, and that repetition creates the illusion that love is broken. But maybe what's broken is the way people define it. Maybe love hasn't changed, maybe we have, maybe we expect too much fantasy and not enough responsibility. Maybe we want effortless depth, but depth is never effortless. It's built, maintained, protected, and protection requires discipline, and discipline isn't romanticized anymore. But without it, nothing lasts. Well, maybe love still works, but only for people who understand that it's not supposed to feel like fireworks forever. It's supposed to feel like foundation, and foundation doesn't crumble at the first sign of imperfection. It strengthens when both people decide to reinforce it. And that's the part that feels rare, not love, but two people equally ready to treat it like something sacred instead of something optional. And until that alignment happens, it's gonna keep feeling broken. And sometimes I wonder if the reason love feels broken is because people are more afraid of vulnerability than they are of loneliness. Loneliness is uncomfortable, but vulnerability feels dangerous. Loneliness just feels empty. Vulnerability feels exposing. And exposing yourself in a world where people can replace you in days feels reckless. So instead of risking being fully seen, people present edited versions of themselves, curated personalities, controlled emotions, measured effort. And when two curated versions try to connect, the connection stays surface level, because depth only forms when masks come off. And masks are safer. Masks protect ego. Masks protect pride. Masks protect image, but masks also block intimacy, and intimacy is what makes love feel alive. Without intimacy, you're just sharing space, and shared space isn't the same as shared depth. Maybe love feels broken because nobody wants to be the first one to remove the armor. Nobody wants to be the one who says, "I care," without knowing if it'll be reciprocated. Nobody wants to look foolish, but love has always required risk. And if risk tolerance is low, depth tolerance is low too. And low depth means fragile connection, and fragile connection collapses under normal human imperfection. Then everyone says, "See, it didn't work," but maybe it never had the chance to, because it was protected too heavily. You can't build something strong if both people are guarding themselves more than they're investing. And that guarding energy feels everywhere now. It feels like people are in relationships half committed, half prepared to exit, always scanning, always evaluating, always calculating. And calculation kills spontaneity. It kills surrender. It kills the soft parts of love, because soft parts require trust, and trust requires time. And time requires patience, and patience feels scarce. So people rush into feelings but hesitate into commitment. They want intensity without obligation, connection without responsibility, attention without accountability. And that imbalance makes everything unstable, because love isn't just emotion. It's discipline, it's consistency when things feel normal. It's showing up when excitement fades, and showing up isn't glamorous, but it's powerful. And maybe we forgot that. Maybe we've glamorized beginnings and neglected maintenance. Maybe we've romanticized sparks and ignored structure. And when structure isn't present, collapse feels inevitable. So love starts to feel broken, not because it doesn't exist, but because it isn't being handled with care. And care requires emotional maturity. And emotional maturity isn't common, it's developed. And development requires self-awareness. And self-awareness requires reflection. And reflection requires sitting with discomfort, and a lot of people avoid discomfort at all costs. So instead of reflecting, they replace. Instead of adjusting, they exit. Instead of building, they restart. And restarting feels easier than repairing. But restarting resets the lesson too, and the cycle continues. And after watching enough cycles, it's hard not to feel like love is just temporary. Like everything eventually fades, like no one really stays. But maybe the problem isn't love. Maybe it's our attention spans. Maybe it's our tolerance for imperfection. Maybe it's our fear of being fully seen. And maybe love only works when two people are brave enough to risk looking foolish for it, brave enough to commit without constant comparison, brave enough to stay when it's not cinematic, brave enough to build when it's not exciting. And that kind of bravery feels rare, but rare doesn't mean non-existent, it just means selective. And maybe the reason love feels broken to me is because I've seen too much avoidance and not enough bravery. But that doesn't mean bravery doesn't exist, it just means I haven't experienced it consistently yet. And that's frustrating, but frustration doesn't equal impossibility. It just means the standard is high, and and high standards take time to align with. So maybe love isn't broken, maybe it's just misused. And until two people approach it with equal discipline and equal depth, it's going to keep feeling unstable. But I still believe, even if it's quiet belief now, that real love requires courage. And courage isn't loud, it's consistent. And when I find someone consistent enough to stay through discomfort instead of running from it, maybe it won't feel broken anymore. Maybe it'll finally feel built. There's another truth I don't always say out loud. Sometimes when I say I don't think love works anymore, what I really mean is I'm scared to believe in it again. Because believing in it requires hope, and hope is heavy when you've watched things fall apart more than once. It's easier to say love is broken than to admit you're afraid of being hurt again. It's easier to act detached than to admit you still want something real. It's easier to lower expectations than to risk disappointment. But the reason it still frustrates me so much is because I do believe in depth, I believe in loyalty, I believe in consistency, I believe in choosing someone and actually staying. So when I look around and see temporary everywhere, it feels like I'm out of place, like I'm built for something that isn't common anymore, and that can make you feel isolated. Because you start wondering if you're unrealistic, if you expect too much, if maybe you're the one who needs to adapt. But adapting to a culture that treats connection lightly feels like losing something essential, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to become someone who loves halfway. I don't want to become someone who keeps emotional backups. I don't want to become someone who leaves at the first sign of discomfort. But when you keep getting hurt for caring deeply, you start questioning if depth is sustainable. You start questioning if maybe emotional availability is a liability. And that's where it starts to feel broken, because when emotional maturity feels like a disadvantage, something is misaligned. If being honest gets you labeled as too intense, if being consistent gets you labeled as too predictable, if being loyal gets you taken for granted, then it feels like the traits that build love aren't valued anymore, and that's exhausting. Because I don't want to play a game where detachment wins. I don't want to pretend I don't care just to maintain power. I don't want to approach relationships strategically. I want to approach them intentionally. And intentional love requires two people who are equally committed to depth, not one person building and one person browsing, not one person healing and one person distracting, not one person fighting and one person evaluating, two people building together. And maybe that's why it feels broken, because alignment like that feels rare, not because it doesn't exist, but because it requires both people to be self-aware enough to recognize what they're building. And self-awareness takes work, and not everyone does the work. But here's something I'm slowly realizing. Just because I haven't experienced that alignment consistently doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means I haven't found someone operating at the same emotional frequency yet. And maybe love doesn't feel like it works because I've been encountering people who are still figuring themselves out, still healing, still exploring, still distracted, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if two people aren't equally ready, love will always feel unstable. So maybe love isn't broken, maybe timing is, maybe readiness is, maybe emotional maturity is, and that's a different problem than love itself. Because love, real love, still requires the same ingredients it always has. Trust, patience, consistency, effort, communication, choice. Those haven't changed. What's changed is how many people are willing to commit to them long term. And that's what makes it feel fragile, but fragile doesn't mean impossible. It just means selective. And maybe the reason it feels broken is because I haven't experienced the selectivity paying off yet. So do I really think love doesn't work anymore? Or am I just tired? Tired of building with people who weren't ready? Tired of investing in connections that weren't aligned? Tired of watching things collapse because one person stopped trying? Maybe what feels broken isn't love. Maybe it's my optimism. Maybe it's my patience. Maybe it's my energy. Because loving deeply takes energy. Believing in something lasting takes courage, and after enough disappointment, courage feels heavy. But here's what I know. I don't want temporary. I don't want half effort. I don't want something that collapses the moment it feels normal. I want stability. I want intentionality. I want someone who doesn't get bored when peace replaces intensity. And if that's rare, then I'll accept that it's rare. But I won't accept that it's impossible because I know I exist. And if I exist, someone who still believes in depth and loyalty and consistency, then that means other people like that exist too. Maybe love doesn't feel like it works because it's not common anymore, but uncommon doesn't mean extinct. It just means it requires discernment. It requires patience. It requires walking away from people who treat connection casually. And maybe that's the real shift. Maybe love doesn't work when we try to force it with the wrong people. Maybe it only works when both people are equally disciplined about it. And discipline isn't flashy, but it's powerful. So maybe love isn't broken. Maybe it's just rare enough that you have to be selective about who you build it with. And until that alignment shows up, it's going to feel unstable. But I refuse to become cold just because it's hard. I refuse to downgrade my depth just because others operate shallow. And one day, when two people who both believe in building, not browsing, meet each other, love won't feel broken. It'll feel intentional. And intentional love, that still works. There's a point where saying love doesn't work anymore becomes less about love and more about self-protection. Because if I convince myself it's broken, then I don't have to risk it again. If I label it dysfunctional, I don't have to open up. If I tell myself everyone leaves, then no one can surprise me when they do. It becomes armor. And armor feels safer than hope. Hope requires vulnerability. Hope requires believing someone will show up differently than the last person did. Hope requires trusting that the next connection won't collapse the same way the others did. And that's hard because patterns create expectations. If you've seen inconsistency enough times, you start expecting it. If you've been replaced quickly, you start bracing for it. If you've watched effort go unmatched, you start rationing yours. And slowly, without even noticing, you stop loving the way you used to. You become careful, measured, guarded. You don't say everything you feel. You don't invest as quickly. You don't attach as deeply. And then when something ends, it hurts less, but it also meant less. And that's the trade-off nobody talks about. If you protect yourself enough, you reduce pain, but you also reduce depth. And depth is the whole point, so maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore because I've been loving defensively. Not fully, not recklessly, but cautiously. And cautious love never fully blooms. It survives. It doesn't flourish. And surviving isn't the same as thriving. Maybe I'm not doubting love. Maybe I'm doubting whether I can afford to feel that deeply again. Because feeling deeply means risking loss deeply. And loss has weight. And carrying that weight repeatedly makes you tired. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If I stop believing in love because others mishandled it, then I let their behavior reshape my character. And I don't want that. I don't want to become someone who loves halfway. I don't want to operate from fear. I don't want to treat every new person like they're already guilty of someone else's mistakes. But healing doesn't happen instantly. Trust doesn't reset overnight. And rebuilding optimism takes time, so maybe love isn't broken. Maybe I'm just rebuilding my trust in it. Maybe what feels like cynicism is actually exhaustion. Maybe what feels like disbelief is actually disappointment that hasn't fully healed, because when I'm honest with myself, I still want depth. I still want consistency. I still want something stable and intentional. If I truly believed love didn't work anymore, I wouldn't still crave it. I wouldn't still think about it. I wouldn't still care this much. The fact that I'm frustrated proves I still believe in it. You don't get frustrated over something you've given up on. You get frustrated over something you still want, but haven't found. And maybe that's the shift. Maybe love isn't broken. Maybe my patience is just being tested. Maybe my standards are filtering out what doesn't align. Maybe every failed connection isn't proof that love doesn't work. maybe it's proof that misalignment doesn't. And misalignment is common, but alignment is rare, and rare things take time to find. So maybe I need to stop saying love is broken. Maybe I need to say love is selective. Maybe I haven't experienced the right version of it yet, because the version I want, stable, mutual, disciplined, requires two people equally committed to depth, and depth isn't everywhere, but it exists. I exist, which means someone else like me exists too, and maybe love doesn't feel like it works because I've been encountering people at different stages of emotional maturity, different levels of readiness, different levels of self-awareness, and that doesn't mean love is dead. It just means timing matters, and readiness matters, and alignment matters. So yeah, some days it feels broken, some days it feels like effort goes nowhere, some days it feels like loyalty isn't valued, but deep down, I don't think love stopped working. I think I'm just tired of building with people who weren't built to stay. And that's different, because when two people are both ready, not just interested, not just attracted, but ready, love doesn't collapse easily. It stabilizes, it deepens, it roots. So maybe love isn't broken. Maybe it just requires the right two people at the right time. And until that alignment shows up, it's gonna feel unstable. But I'm not done believing in it. I'm just more careful about who I build it with, and that's growth. Not defeat. You wanted her. There's no point pretending otherwise. You didn't just like her, you imagined a future with her. You pictured small moments turning into something bigger, late nights, shared laughs, quiet mornings. You replayed conversations in your head, wondering what they meant, wondering what could have been. And somewhere along the way, you gave more than you should have, not because you were weak, but because you cared deeply. And that's the part that hurts first. Losing someone you imagined a future with doesn't just sting, it shakes you. Missing someone who no longer misses you back feels heavy in a way that's hard to explain. But here's the truth that takes time to settle in. Missing someone doesn't mean you need them. And needing someone who could walk away without looking back isn't love. It's you slowly forgetting your own worth. When you pour everything into someone, you start shrinking yourself without realizing it. You start waiting for replies, waiting for effort, waiting for reassurance that should never have been questioned. You begin measuring your value by how much they choose you, and that's where you lose yourself. Not because you love too hard, but because you love someone who couldn't meet you where you stood. Think about it. Before she entered your life, you existed fully. You had goals, motivation, passions, and a sense of direction. She didn't create those things. She didn't complete you. She simply became a part of your story for a moment. And when that moment ended, it felt like something was taken from you. But nothing essential was ever removed. What you lost was attachment, not identity. You might still care. You might still think about her. That doesn't disappear overnight. Healing isn't about pretending you feel nothing. It's about understanding that love should never make you feel like you're begging to be chosen. The right person doesn't make you question your value or wonder where you stand. They don't leave you confused, waiting, or doubting yourself. So yes, it hurts, and it's okay to admit that, but remind yourself of this: you don't need someone who made you feel replaceable. You don't need someone who couldn't show up the way you did. What you need is to return to yourself, to remember who you were before you started chasing someone who couldn't give you the love you deserved. Because the right connection doesn't drain you. It meets you with clarity, effort, and consistency. And until that shows up, choosing yourself isn't a loss. It's the beginning of getting your power back. It's Valentine's Day, and yeah, I'm alone. No dinner plans, no flowers. No good morning, beautiful text waiting on my phone. Just me. And for a second, it hits. You scroll and see everyone posted up. Roses, candles, soft captions about my forever. And you start wondering what it feels like to be chosen like that. Not privately, not secretly, but confidently. I won't lie, there's a quiet sting to it. Not because I need the holiday, but because it reminds you of what you don't have. It makes you question things. Am I behind? Am I unlovable? Did I miss my person somehow? But here's the part I'm learning. Being alone today doesn't mean I'm unwanted. It means I haven't settled. I could have been in something halfway. Could have forced a connection just to say I wasn't alone tonight, but I didn't. And that matters. So yeah, I'm alone, but I'm not desperate, not chasing, not pretending, just here. And maybe that's not sad. Maybe it's strength. Valentine's Day has a way of making you feel behind. Like everyone else got the memo and you didn't. You open your phone and it's everywhere. Couples at dinner, surprise gifts, long captions about my person. And even if you're strong, even if you've healed, even if you're okay most days, comparison still creeps in. You start measuring your life against highlight reels. You forget that people only post the soft parts. You forget the arguments, the doubts, the almost breakups. All you see is what you don't have. And for a minute, it makes being alone feel heavier, not because you suddenly need someone, but because the world makes it look like today is proof of something. Proof that you're chosen, proof that you're loved, proof that you made it. But here's the truth nobody posts. A relationship on Valentine's Day doesn't mean it's healthy. Flowers don't mean loyalty. A dinner reservation doesn't mean forever. And being alone doesn't mean you failed. It just means your story isn't on display today. And that's okay. There's a difference between being alone and feeling lonely. And today forces you to notice it. Being alone is physical. It's no dinner plans, no shared dessert, no one reaching for your hand across the table. Lonely is emotional. Lonely is feeling unseen even when someone's sitting next to you. Lonely is being in a relationship where you still question if you matter. I've been lonely with someone before, and honestly, that felt worse than tonight, because at least now I'm not pretending. I'm not settling for half attention just to say I'm not alone. I'm not forcing conversation to avoid silence. It's just me. And yeah, sometimes that's quiet, sometimes it's heavy, but it's honest. There's no confusion here, no mixed signals, no wondering where I stand. So maybe being alone today isn't the loss I thought it was. Maybe it's just space for something real instead of something convenient. Let's be real. There's always that moment where you think about texting someone, not because you miss them, not because you want them back, but because you don't want to feel alone tonight. You scroll, you hover over a name, you think, it's just a harmless message, just a hey, just what are you up to? Just something to fill the silence. And for a second, your pride and your loneliness argue, because attention is easy to get. Connection isn't. You could text the almost, the ex, the person who only shows up when it's convenient, and maybe they'd respond. Maybe they'd even make you feel wanted for a few hours. But tomorrow, you'd wake up right back in the same place, because you didn't want them, you wanted distraction. And there's a difference. So instead of reaching for temporary comfort, you sit with the quiet. You choose not to reopen doors that were closed for a reason. You choose not to trade peace for short-term validation. And that choice, that's growth. Being alone tonight doesn't mean you're desperate. It means you're disciplined. There was a time this day would have broken me. I would have taken it personally, like it was proof that I wasn't enough. I would have blamed myself, wondered what I needed to fix, compared my timeline to everyone else's like love was some kind of race. But it doesn't hit like that anymore because I understand something now. Being single on Valentine's Day isn't a reflection of my worth, it's a reflection of my standards. I could have rushed into something, ignored red flags, stayed with someone who didn't choose me fully just so I wouldn't be alone today. But I didn't, and that's growth. This day doesn't control my value. It doesn't define my desirability. It doesn't measure my future. It's just a date on a calendar. And yeah, sometimes it still stings a little, but it doesn't shake me, because I'd rather spend one day alone than spend months with someone who makes me feel unseen. And that shift, that's peace. Spending Valentine's Day alone actually teaches you something. You learn who you are without someone validating you. There's no us to hide behind, no relationship status to lean on, no public display to prove you're wanted. It's just you, and that can feel exposing. Because when the noise dies down, you're left with your own thoughts. You start asking yourself, am I really okay? Am I lonely or just uncomfortable? Do I want love, or do I just hate feeling left out? And those questions matter, because being alone forces honesty. You realize you don't just want a relationship, you want the right one. Not someone to post, not someone to text for the night, not someone to fill space. You want something steady, intentional, real. And sitting alone tonight proves something important. You're willing to wait. You're willing to protect your peace. You're willing to sit through temporary discomfort instead of choosing permanent misalignment. That's not weakness, that's maturity. Valentine's Day alone doesn't mean you're lacking. It means you're not settling. Let's talk about self-love, but not the cliche version, not the bubble baths, not the I don't need anyone speeches, not pretending you're perfectly fine 24/7. Real self-love is quieter than that. It's not about convincing yourself you don't want love. It's about refusing to accept less just because you want it. It's choosing not to text someone who only values you when they're bored. It's not lowering your standards just to avoid feeling left out tonight. It's sitting in the discomfort without betraying yourself. Self-love isn't loud confidence. Sometimes it's discipline. It's saying, I deserve something real, even when being alone feels heavy. It's acknowledging, yeah, I want to be loved, without shaming yourself for it. Because wanting love doesn't make you weak, settling does. So if you're alone today, that doesn't mean you failed at self-love. It might mean you're finally practicing. There's a quiet strength in being single in a world that glorifies couples. Everything is marketed around us. Dinner for two, matching gifts, shared experiences, and when you're alone, it can feel like you're standing outside of something everyone else was invited to. But here's what people don't talk about. It takes strength to not force a relationship just to fit in. It takes strength to say, I'd rather wait, in a culture that says, just take what you can get. Being single isn't a flaw. It's not a delay. It's not a sign you're unwanted. Sometimes it's a sign you refuse to compromise your standards for temporary comfort. There's power in knowing you're not with someone just to avoid this day. There's power in walking into restaurants alone without feeling embarrassed, and going home to yourself without feeling incomplete, because your worth was never meant to be measured by who's sitting next to you. And the strongest thing you can do is stand alone without shrinking. Maybe the season of being alone isn't punishment, maybe it's preparation. Because when you're by yourself, you learn things you don't learn in relationships. You learn your triggers, your patterns, your standards. You learn what you actually want without someone else influencing it. Being alone gives you clarity. Clarity about what you won't tolerate. Clarity about what makes you feel safe. Clarity about the difference between attention and intention. And maybe that clarity is building something in you. Patience, discernment, emotional discipline. So when something real does show up, you won't grab it out of fear. You won't cling to it out of loneliness. You won't confuse it with the first person who makes you feel seen. You'll recognize it calmly because you'll know the difference between desperation and alignment. Maybe this Valentine's Day alone isn't a sign you're behind. Maybe it's proof you're becoming someone who won't settle. And that kind of growth doesn't always look romantic, but it lasts. At the end of the day, I'm still alone. No dramatic plot twist, no last-minute confession, no surprise flowers at my door, just me. But it doesn't feel heavy anymore, because being alone today didn't expose a flaw in me. It exposed my discipline. I didn't text someone out of boredom. I didn't settle just to post something. I didn't force a connection to avoid the silence. I chose peace, and that choice matters more than a dinner reservation ever could. Valentine's Day used to feel like proof that I was missing something. Now it feels like proof that I'm protecting something. My standards, my growth, my future. Because when love does come, I don't want it to be rushed. I don't want it to be convenient. I don't want it to be temporary. I want it to be real. So if that means spending this day alone instead of in something halfway, I'm okay with that. Being alone tonight doesn't mean I'm unloved. It means I'm waiting for something worth loving, and that's not sad. That's strength. I'll be gone one day. Not in a dramatic way, not as a threat, not as a goodbye, just as a fact. One day I won't be this accessible. I won't be this available. I won't be this version of me. And sometimes I wonder, will people notice? Will they realize what I carried, what I gave, what I stayed through? Or will it only make sense when I'm not around to do it anymore? It's strange feeling invisible while you're still here. You show up, you check in, you stay consistent, you carry conversations, you give effort, you hold things together quietly. But it feels expected, like your presence is normal, like your loyalty is assumed, like your effort is just background noise. And that's when the thought creeps in. If I stopped doing this, if I pulled back, if I disappeared, would Would anyone feel the shift, or do people only realize what you meant after you're no longer there to give it? Being the strong one rarely gets applauded. You're the one people vent to, the one who keeps it together, the one who doesn't break down publicly. So they assume you're fine. They assume you don't need reassurance, don't need checking in, don't need to be chosen loudly, because you've trained everyone to see you as stable. But strength can be lonely, carrying everyone else's emotions while quietly managing your own, smiling through things you never fully process. And sometimes you think, if I ever stopped being the strong one, would anyone know how to hold me? Or would they only realize what I was carrying after I put it down? There's a quiet exhaustion that comes with always being dependable. You don't cancel, you don't disappear, you don't make people question where they stand with you. You're solid. And because of that, people get comfortable. They assume you'll always answer, always show up, always understand. But no one asks how much it costs you. No one sees the days you wanted to shut down, the moments you needed someone else to take the lead. Being reliable is a beautiful trait, but when it's constant, it becomes heavy. And sometimes you think, if I ever stop carrying this role, will they notice the weight I was holding all along? What happens when the dependable one finally pulls back? At first, nothing. People assume you're just busy, just tired, just having an off day. But when the consistency shifts, when the long paragraphs turn short, when the constant availability fades, that's when they feel it. The silence hits different when it's coming from the one who never used to go quiet. And suddenly they notice what you used to do, the way you checked in first, the way you kept things from falling apart, the way you made everything feel steady. And it's not about revenge, it's not about proving a point, it's about capacity, because even the strongest ones get tired of being unheld. And when they finally step back, it's not dramatic, it's quiet, but it changes everything. Being gone doesn't always mean physically leaving. Sometimes it means emotionally detaching, still replying, but not overextending, still present, but not pouring the same energy, still there, but no longer carrying what isn't yours. That shift is subtle. You don't announce it, you don't explain it, you just stop overgiving. And the people who were used to your full capacity start to feel the difference, because now you're protecting your energy instead of offering it endlessly. You're choosing peace over being needed, and sometimes that's the real goodbye, not disappearing, just deciding you deserve to be poured into too. Being gone one day might not mean disappearing. It might mean evolving, becoming a version of yourself that not everyone gets access to anymore. The version that over-explains, that overextends, that tolerates bare minimum, gone. The version that accepts crumbs just to keep the peace, gone. Growth changes your availability. You don't respond the same. You don't tolerate the same. You don't give the same unlimited access. And some people will say you changed. They'll say you're distant, different, harder to reach. But what they really mean is you stopped being endlessly accessible. And sometimes being gone is just becoming too self-aware to stay in spaces that don't value you. The right people won't lose you when you grow. They won't complain that you changed. They'll adjust with you, because real connection isn't built on convenience. It's built on understanding. When you stop overgiving, the right ones won't call you distant. They'll ask if you're okay. When you set boundaries, the right ones won't feel attacked. They'll respect them. When you evolve, the right ones won't feel threatened. They'll evolve too. Growth doesn't push away what's aligned. It only exposes what was comfortable. And if one day you're gone because you chose peace over pressure, the people meant for you won't lose access. They'll meet you at your new level. One day, being gone might just mean I finally chose myself, not selfishly, not dramatically, fully choosing peace over pressure, fully choosing growth over familiarity, fully choosing reciprocity over exhaustion. Because for a long time I chose understanding, I chose patience, I chose staying, even when it drained me. But one day I'll choose alignment, and that might look like distance to people who benefited from my overgiving. It might look like silence to people who only checked in when I carried things. But to me, it'll feel like relief, because being gone isn't always about leaving others. Sometimes it's about finally not leaving yourself. I'll be gone one day, but not in a tragic way, in a transformative way. I'll be gone from the spaces that drained me, gone from the roles that confined me, gone from the version of me that overgave just to be appreciated. And the people who only valued what I provided, they'll call it distance. The people who only noticed when I carried things, they'll call it change. But the ones who truly saw me, they'll understand. Because being gone isn't disappearing, it's evolution. It's choosing peace over performance, reciprocity over exhaustion, alignment over attachment. One day I'll be gone, and it won't be because I faded. It'll be because I finally grew into a version of myself that refuses to stay where I'm not valued. And that's not a loss. That's a rebirth. I don't care how corny it sounds, I'll never stop being a lover boy. Not until I get the kind of love I've always imagined. The kind where there is no one else, no distractions, no half interest. Just one person in a world that feels smaller because of it. I want that kind of love where it doesn't wander, where nobody else even registers. Where loving them feels natural, not forced. The kind of love that feels cinematic without trying. Just two people driving nowhere, standing in open fields, traveling for no reason other than wanting to be together. The kind of love you don't just feel in your chest, you feel it in your soul, hot, intense, alive. And I don't understand how people walk around acting indifferent to that. Love is something casual, like it doesn't matter, because love is everything. Sharing the world with someone, learning their habits, knowing their moods, understanding them in ways nobody else does. Going from strangers to someone you can't imagine life without, there's nothing like it. And yeah, love comes with risk, heartbreak, loss, pain, but I'm here for all of it, because if that's the price of loving deeply, I'll pay it. I'll take the heartbreak, I'll take the uncertainty, I'll take the risk. The lover boy in me isn't dying. It can't. What makes it hard sometimes isn't loving deeply. It's loving deeply in a world that pretends not to care. People act like being attached is embarrassing, like wanting someone fully is something you should hide. They call it nonchalant. They call it cool. They call it protecting yourself. But to me, it just feels empty. I don't want love that's casual. I don't want half interest. I don't want to act like I wouldn't be crushed if I lost someone I care about. I want to feel it. I want the kind of love where my heart is all the way in. No exits, no backups, no pretending. And yeah, that makes me vulnerable. It means I get hurt easier. It means I feel things more intensely, but I'd rather feel everything than live numb just to look unbothered, because loving deeply isn't weakness, it's courage. It takes guts to say I want you fully. I'm choosing you. I'm not scared to care. And maybe that's why it feels lonely sometimes, because not everyone is built to love like that. But I am. And I'm not going to dull that part of me just to fit into a world that treats love like it's optional. Loving this way hurts more because you don't do it halfway. You don't keep one foot out the door. You don't love with conditions. You don't calculate how much to give. When you fall completely. And that means when things don't work out, it hits harder. You don't just lose a person, you lose the future you already imagined, the places you pictured going together, the version of yourself that only existed with them. People say, I don't get your hopes up, protect your care less, but that's never been you. You don't know how to want someone quietly, you don't know how to love without meaning it, and you don't want to learn, because even when it hurts, loving deeply still feels better than pretending you don't care. Yeah, heartbreak changes you. It slows you down, makes you cautious for a while, but it never kills that part of you that believes in something more. And that's the difference. Some people close their hearts after pain. Others keep theirs open, not because they're naive, but because they refuse to let disappointment turn them cold. You don't love deeply because it's easy. You love deeply because that's who you are. And even when it costs you, You'd rather feel everything than live a life that feels empty. The truth is, you already know how this can end. You know love can break you. You know it can leave scars. You know it can take pieces you don't get back, and still you choose it. Not because you're reckless, not because you're desperate, but because a life without love feels smaller than a life with heartbreak. You're not chasing perfection, you're chasing connection. The kind that makes the world feel louder and quieter at the same time. The kind that turns ordinary moments into memories. The kind that makes you feel seen in ways words can't explain. People say love like that is unrealistic, that it only exists in movies or stories, but you've felt glimpses of it, enough to know it's real, and once you've felt that, you can't pretend you don't want it anymore. So yeah, you risk it again, you open your heart again, you believe again, not because you forgot the pain, but because you decided it wasn't stronger than your capacity to love. Being a lover boy doesn't mean you ignore reality, it means you face it and still choose love anyway. When you say you want that kind of love, you're not talking about perfection, you're not chasing fantasy or some unrealistic fairy tale ending. You're talking about presence, the kind of love where you don't feel alone even when you're silent, where being together feels natural, not forced, where effort doesn't feel like work. Is waking up and knowing there's one person in the world who chooses you without hesitation, not because they have to, but because they want to. It's traveling with no plan and still feeling grounded, standing in open spaces and realizing the world feels fuller just because they're next to you. It's loyalty without fear, commitment without control, love that feels intense but never unsafe. That's the kind of love you want. Not obsession, not possession, connection. The kind where you don't question intentions, you don't wonder where you stand, you don't compete with distractions, you're just there, fully, openly chosen, and wanting that doesn't make you unrealistic, it makes you honest. Because once you know how deeply you can love, you stop settling for anything that asks you to dim that fire. Waiting doesn't scare you, settling does. You've seen what happens when people accept less than what they feel. They grow distant, they grow quiet, they start convincing themselves that good enough is enough, and you don't want that. You don't want a love that feels convenient. You don't want someone who chooses you only when it's easy. You want someone who stays when it's real, when it's messy, when it requires effort. So you wait, not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you know yourself. You know how deeply you love, you know how much you give, and you know what happens when that kind of heart ends up in the wrong hands. You'd rather be alone than feel lonely next to someone who doesn't meet you where you stand. And yeah, some days it gets heavy, watching people pair off, watching others settle into relationships that look fine on the surface, but deep down, you're not jealous. You're patient, because you're not searching for company, you're waiting for alignment, for someone who doesn't flinch at your intensity, who doesn't joke about your softness, who doesn't treat your loyalty like it's replaceable. You're waiting for someone who wants the same kind of love you do, all in, no exits, and until that shows up, you're not lowering your standards, you're protecting your heart. If it ever happens, when someone finally matches your energy, you'll feel the difference immediately. Not fireworks, not chaos, not anxiety disguised as excitement, clarity. You won't question where you stand. You won't wonder if you're asking for too much. You won't feel like you're loving harder than you're being loved. It'll feel mutual in a way you're not used to. They won't flinch at your intensity. They won't joke about you caring too much. They won't act overwhelmed by the way you love. They'll meet it. Your effort won't scare them. It'll reassure them. Your loyalty won't feel rare. It'll feel natural. And the craziest part, you won't feel like you're chasing anything. No convincing. No proving, no waiting for them to catch up emotionally. They'll already be there. And suddenly, all that waiting makes sense. All the times you didn't settle, all the times you walked away, all the times you chose being alone over being half-loved. You'll realize you weren't asking for too much, you were just asking the wrong people. When someone finally loves you the way you've always loved others, it won't feel overwhelming. It'll feel right. At the end of everything, after the waiting, the heartbreak, the disappointment, the almost one thing, never leaves. Your capacity to love, you don't lose it. Even when people try to convince you that you should, even when the world rewards detachment, even when acting unbothered looks easier, even when caring deeply costs you more than you expected, because loving fully was never a phase for you. It's part of who you are. You were built to feel things deeply, to choose one person and mean it, to love in a way that's intentional, loyal, and complete. And yeah, that makes you vulnerable, but it also makes you real. The lover boy in you survives every heartbreak, not because you forget the pain, but because you decide it's not stronger than your heart. You don't regret loving, you don't regret believing, you don't regret wanting something rare, because one day someone will meet you in that same place. They won't laugh at your intensity. They won't treat your love like it's extra. They won't ask you to tone it down. They'll recognize it. And when that happens, everything you held on to will make sense. So no, the lover boy in you doesn't die. He just waits. And when the right love finally arrives, he'll be ready